That's
Alright,
how all of this on
gaslit.
both sides.
Is it bad to give information?
I'll DM Sabine and say, you know what, Kelly Jean really
doesn't have anything to do
confused
with me,
and thinks you're
retard.
conflating all
Shut
this
the
stuff.
up.
So you
What
want to
did
make sure you pull out
Holy
Kelly. I wanted to come on and apologize to you.
Thank you.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
Should transgender teens transition? This rather personal question occupies a prominent place in the American culture war. On the one side, you have people claiming that it's a socially contagious fad among the brainwashed woke who want to mutilate your innocent children. On the other side, there are those saying that it's saving the lives of minorities who've been forced to stay in the closet for too long. And then there are normal people like you and I who think both sides are crazy, and could someone please summarize the facts in simple words, which is what I'm here for. So what's going on? Is it true that the number of teenagers who identify as transgender is rising rapidly? What's gender-affirming care? Does it work? And why are some countries like Sweden, Finland, and the UK rolling back gender-affirming treatments for children? That's what we'll talk about today. The vast majority of humans are born with an unambiguous biological sex that's either male or female. While there are some intersex conditions, they're rare. For the most part, biological sex in humans is fairly simple. People with XX chromosomes are biologically female, have ovaries and grow breasts. People with XY chromosomes are biologically male, have testicles and leave the toilet seat up. It's more difficult for some fish who can change their sex, but there are few fish among my subscribers, so with apologies to all fish who may be watching, I'll leave this complication aside. Gender identity is as difficult as sex is simple. Gender refers to our internal sense of being female, male, or something else. As everything internal, it's subjective and hard to properly define. Gender identity comes about by a mix of genes, acquired biological traits, environmental and social factors, and cultural expectations. When someone's perceived gender doesn't align with their biological sex, we've come to call them transgender. The other case, when sex aligns with gender, is often called cisgender. Transgender people may feel like they're trapped in the wrong body. Not all, but some of them are distressed.
I'm getting some weird vibes from this lady for a time now. I know she's a physics PhD, but she's not even with some subjects like statements like normal people like you and I think both sides are crazy. Yeah, we'll see what she does. I'm half expecting because the problem with this is what I like about me. This is why I'm so special, okay? And I wish there were more people like me, okay? There are some times where I can see that I think mainstream opinion gets something a little bit wrong, but it doesn't make me anti-mainstream on every single fucking topic. And I feel like that happens to everybody. So obviously she's opposed to some of the way that physics research has gone. So I don't really care about her opinion as much. I'm kind of watching this video to see, is she about to be like, oh, the trans stuff is fake, we're being indoctrinated, blah, blah, blah. Or is she somebody that can have she says that well, the establishment is wrong on this thing sometimes, but here's my reasonable take on things. Yeah, I don't know. Because it seems like as soon as somebody finds one thing that's establishment that they disagree with, all of a sudden they become oh, well, here's every single way that every single congressman is actually fucking Jeffrey Epstein's enslaved girls and the FDA is evil. Yeah, I don't know, but we'll see.
By this experience and develop what's called gender dysphoria, a recognized psychological condition which might severely limit their quality of life. Some transgender people prefer not to draw a distinction between sex and gender, and instead distinguish between their experienced gender and the assigned gender, or the gender assigned at birth. For the rest of this video, we'll do the same. Being transgender is neither new nor necessarily detrimental to mental health. It's just a not very common variation of normal human development. Personally, I find it highly questionable there's such a thing as normal human development to begin with. Have you ever seen a normal human? I haven't. More seriously, records of transgender people date back thousands of years. Several cultures, for example in India and Thailand, have communities of a third neutral gender. Unfortunately, transgender people have historically been stigmatized in many societies, have been ridiculed, been targets of violence.
I'm not bailing you out next time. Feels weird, man.
Wait, who's not bailing me out? What was the first part of that, Dono? Hope you learned your lesson. Oh, thanks, buddy.
forced to fit into the binary masculine-feminine pattern. In many places, this is still happening, and in some countries, such as Indonesia and Nigeria, being transgender is still illegal. The combination of social and physical challenges makes the lives of transgender people, especially young ones, difficult. A 2017 survey of 125,000 American high school students found that transgender students were much more likely to report having suffered sexual violence while on a date, a problem that affects more than 1 in 5, and about 1 in 3 reported having attempted suicide. That's more than 3 times higher than the suicide risk among cis women. This is why, starting in the 1970s, the medical profession took steps to prevent psychological distress of transgender people, the Dutch leading the way. This isn't a history channel, so I won't go through all the twists and turns. Let me just tell you how gender dysphoria is defined today. Psychiatrists classify mental disorders using the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM for short. Its latest edition is the DSM-5-TR, that's the 2022 update. It specifies gender dysphoria in children as a marked incongruence between one's experienced or expressed gender and assigned gender of at least 6 months duration that is accompanied by a strong desire to be of the other gender or an insistence that one is of the other gender, or some alternative gender different from one's assigned gender. It must be associated with significant distress and at least 5 other symptoms, such as a strong preference for toys or clothes stereotypically used by the other gender, or a strong dislike of one's sexual anatomy. That's the diagnosis of gender dysphoria. Now let's talk about the self-identification as transgender. The share of people who identify as transgender in the developed world is typically around 0.5%. For example, in the 2021 UK government census, about 0.5% of people older than 16 answered no to the question of whether their gender is the same as their sex registered at birth. The US Census Bureau did a similar survey in 2021 and saw 0.6% identifying as transgender. A 2021 census in Canada among people aged 15 and older saw 0.19% identify as transgender and 0.15% as non-binary. Curiously, though, the fraction is considerably higher among teenagers than among adults. For example, last year a survey from the Williams Institute at UCLA found that in the age group 13 to 17, the percentage of Americans who identify as transgender is about 1.4%, more than twice as high as that among adults. And while the percentage of adults that identify as transgender has remained roughly stable, that among teenagers has almost doubled from 2016 to 2021. It's a steep increase. In the United States, the number of gender clinics which treat children has grown from basically none to more than 100 in 15 years. Just like the wrinkles in my face, a good reminder that correlation is not causation. According to data collected by the American health tech company Komodo Health for Reuters, the number of insured children aged 6 to 17 diagnosed with gender dysphoria in the US has increased from 15,000 in 2017 to 42,000 in 2021, so roughly a factor 2 to 3. About 6,000 of them are either on puberty blockers or undergoing hormone therapy. One expects the true numbers to be somewhat higher because they didn't count cases that were not covered by insurance, but it's probably not a huge difference. To put these numbers into context, there are about 25 million children in the US in that age group, which means we're talking about roughly 3 in 10,000 children who are taking medication for gender dysphoria. So we may be looking at a steep increase, but the total numbers are small. Still, it's puzzling and not an exclusively American phenomenon either. The same has been observed in the UK, where the number of referrals to the British Gender Identity Development Service has increased by more than a factor of 20 from 2011 to 2020. It's also been seen in Sweden and in Canada and pretty much everywhere where they've collected numbers. Curiously enough, the big bulk of the increase comes from children assigned female at birth, wishing to transition to male. This is weird because in earlier generations the ratio was the other way round, or approximately equal. The same thing has been observed in the Netherlands, in Spain, in the UK, Canada, Sweden, and is also the case in the USA. Most of the increase in gender dysphoria reports comes from girls. Pretty much no one questions this. What's more controversial is the question whether the typical age of girls to report gender dysphoria is also changing, and if so, why? In 2018, the American physician Lisa Littman argued in a paper based on survey results among parents that the girls being referred to gender clinics in recent years are different from those of earlier generations. They show an onset of gender dysphoria.
This is like an interesting question that I don't even know who you would begin to ask, because asking a trans man would be hard and asking like a cis woman would be hard. My understanding is that like it feels like female puberty, I think, is weirder than male puberty, I think. Because I feel like as a man, there are like kind of weird things. You have to start wearing deodorant, you start getting hairy, your dick grows a bit, your voice can squeak a little bit. And it's kind of like, you know, that's like the negative parts. But for women, imagine if the boob thing is a really big deal. Like, the fact that people can see boobs and everything, like if your boobs come in early, it's really fucking weird. If your boobs don't come in enough and you've got small boobs, it's really fucking weird. If periods and everything are really fucking weird. The hormone fluctuations and everything that are involved with periods are really fucking weird. I feel like there's a lot more physical outward presentation for women that's pressured, which also like makes all this difficult as well, you know? Like, one thing I'd be curious about is like, I feel like every woman that goes through puberty, or a lot of them, probably have like some, we can call it like dysphoria related to female puberty. How do you know, how could you tell now with the trans stuff, like, oh God, maybe I'm trans and I just want to be a man? Like, I feel like probably every single woman at one point going through puberty probably felt that way. Like, this sucks, I wish I was just male. Like, I feel like I'm not a woman. Like, I feel like it'd be a really difficult thing to sort out with like trans stuff being a thing, you know? Like how do you figure out what's dysphoric versus what's just like puberty's awkward, you know?
Adolescence, but without prior symptoms, a combination that was previously basically unheard of. Littman dubbed it rapid onset of gender dysphoria and suggested that it's a case of social contagion. Adolescent girls get the idea from social media or their peers or both and come to believe they want to be men, hoping it'll improve their lives. Superficially, the hypothesis makes sense. According to data from the World Health Organization, adolescent girls are twice as likely as boys to suffer from mental health problems such as depression and anxiety, so they're more likely to have a problem to solve in the first place. Littman speculates that girls that age are more vulnerable to social contagion than boys, though there's little evidence to back this up. Littman's paper was strongly criticized for not being a scientific study, but a collection of experience reports from parents. The parents were recruited among frequent visitors to websites who are skeptical that transgender self-identification among teenagers is genuine. This means the sample is unlikely to be representative. Indeed, Littman herself writes in a paper that it's a descriptive exploratory study. She describes what those parents say. What to conclude from that is a different story. A paper that came out in August last year claimed to have found evidence for the absence of this rapid onset symptom. However, this paper was also strongly criticized for severe shortcomings, such as, most importantly, for phrasing their survey questions in an ambiguous way and creative methods of interpreting their data. The brief summary of this controversy is that at the moment, there is no conclusive evidence neither for nor against the existence of rapid onset gender dysphoria, though it seems to be supported by...
Yeah, I think I didn't learn this until like a year or two ago. One of the weirdest things for me for female puberty is that like, I would have thought that like women first started to get treated sexually, like hit on, maybe like 14. like when you really start to develop, like flesh out the secondary sex characteristics. And for a lot of women, it seems like you first start, like the first experience you have being sexualized by a man is like, it's more like fucking 9 years old. It's like, Jesus Christ, which is, yeah, I don't know. Ugh.
By anecdotal reports from doctors working in clinics who treat the children. The steep increase in the number of girls reporting gender dysphoria is, however, clearly evident in the data. Another issue that physicians have brought up is that many of the adolescent children assigned female at birth who are now presenting with gender dysphoria.
I think there's a link to undiagnosed autism in girls. I'm autistic and mother of 3 diagnosed kids. 2 girls. Identity isn't forming in as girls due to masking.
Yeah, maybe. I'm still not even sure how I feel about autism, but yeah, I don't know.
Problems too. So what happens to those children who are diagnosed with gender dysphoria? The treatment regime is called gender-affirming care. It starts with the child adopting a new name and pronouns that fit their chosen gender. They begin to change their appearance and join groups that belong to that gender. For example, if you want to be a girl, you join the physics club. At the age of 10 or so, they begin taking puberty blockers, which are drugs which prevent the onset of puberty and stop the development of secondary sexual characteristics.
What do you mean by that? Well, like in terms of like, is autism a disease? Is it a collection of diseases? Is it even, like, should we even talk about like the mind as like being neurotypical? Is that like a weird way to even approach things? Like, I don't know, it's kind of complicated.
Such as breasts, body hair, or collections of sanitary pads from every possible brand in existence, which is what happened in our household. Puberty blockers are used to prevent the dysphoria from getting worse and also to give the children time to make up their mind. The medication is typically given as injections, either monthly or every 3 months, or through an implant placed under the skin of the upper arm, which needs to be replaced every 12 months. If the children and their parents wish to go forward, then at the age of 15 or so, they proceed with hormone therapy to induce puberty of the newly chosen gender. This means those assigned male at birth take drugs to block testosterone and instead increase estrogen levels. Those assigned female at birth instead suppress estrogen and take testosterone. At least in previous cohorts, most children who took puberty blockers continued with hormone therapy. According to estimates from the Netherlands, as much as 95%. Some of them might eventually choose surgery to reshape genitals and breasts or remove internal organs. But surgeries are almost always delayed until adult age. They are basically unheard of in children and are very rare in teens. The American healthcare system isn't exactly known for being affordable, so you won't be surprised to hear that the costs for gender-affirming care in the US can be substantial.
It's probably not a severe / but I think adults do that to little boys too. You're gonna be such a lady killer, etc. Dude, I used to always, anytime somebody would say anything like that to Nathan, I talked to his mom about this a lot too. One of the grossest fucking things, I hate it. Never let anybody do this to my kid when I was around. Is whenever little kids hang out with each other, when everybody's like, oh, look, is that your little girlfriend? Is that your little boyfriend? I think it is the cringiest, most gross fucking thing to do. I hate that with a fiery fucking passion. I hate that. It's so gross. Like when Nathan was like 6 or 7, or like an aunt or uncle, like, oh, is that his little girlfriend? It's like, no, they're 6 or 7. There was so many times in my life where I was so close, but it would have gotten me excommunicado from the whole family, from my kid's mom's family. Like, because anytime somebody says that, like, oh, is that his little girlfriend? Like, my temptation would be like, oh, yeah, like, he's gonna go fuck her with his 6-year-old dick later. What the fuck kind of question is that? That was such an inappropriate, disgusting thing to say, you fucking bitch. Don't talk about my kid that way. But obviously, that would be way too edgy, and it would be... I think I'd probably get kicked out of the house. But it's such a gross thing to say. They're little kids. Let them go fucking play without being weird about it. God, I hate that. Fuck, it's so gross. Anyway.
Costs for hormone therapy are typically $100 to $200 a month.
It seems pretty innocent. I don't think it's not innocent at all. It's parents fucking with kids for their own amusement. It's not innocent. It's parents that are playing games and fucking with kids because they think it's cute and funny. But it's probably not healthy, or it's probably not positive for a child's development. Why would you make them feel weird? Why would you make them feel like guilty or install like weird? Like, let them play. When the kids are like 5, 6, 7 years old, they're not really thinking generally like girlfriend, boyfriend shit. All of that is coming from adults. Like up until kids are probably, I don't know, 9, 10, 11, 12, like in that kind of age range, then they're starting to develop more, they're getting like the dynamics of like boyfriend girlfriend shit, or like looking at girls or boys in different ways or whatever. But when the kids are like 6, 7, 8 years old, it's fucking weird and creepy to be like, oh, is that your little girlfriend? Oh, is that your boy? Like, you're just making them feel weird about it for no fucking reason. And kids are smart. They pick up on that shit really easily. Like when parents start making jokes and comments like that, they start looking at shit like, it's so fucking weird. Like, I think that's so gross. Just like let the kids play. Just like let them play.
Plus expenses for the doctor's visits and the counseling. Surgery starts at $3,000 to $10,000 for top surgery, whereas bottom surgery typically costs around $25,000. And let's be clear that those innocent-sounding euphemisms mean they're cutting off parts of the anatomy that'll never come back. This is only the cost for the surgery itself, not the care they'll need afterwards. There are no reliable numbers on the total cost, but experience reports that you find online say the total expenses for gender-affirming care can exceed $100,000 even with insurance coverage. Okay, so some people are making a lot of money with this. Does it at least work?
Sorry if you were an uncle or aunt and I made you feel bad. But listen, just let kids play with each other, okay? That's all I'm saying, okay? I don't think parents do it maliciously. I don't think parents do it because they're trying to fuck with their kids. I just think that's like, why make things weird?
Puberty blockers work in the sense that they block puberty.
Destiny, you are contributing to hypersensitive bullshit with that take. It's all playful and kids don't understand it. Ugh. Okay. I'm assuming you're not a parent, but you could be, because parents are fucking retarded too, okay? Kids are very fucking smart, okay? They learn a whole language in a couple years, from having no fucking brain at all to entering the world to being able to speak a language in a few, okay? Kids are very perceptive. They're very intelligent. They pick up on a lot of things. Nothing is more retarded to me. You'll get these stupid fucks walking around who will be like, my dog can tell whenever I'm sad because as soon as I come in the house without even me having to say anything, he's cuddling with me. And then these motherfuckers will be like, I don't think our kids can hear us screaming at each other in the other room and then walking with pissed off looks on our face to put in bed. Like, bro, your kids are very receptive. Like, we're social creatures. We learn by analysis or we learn by socialization or whatever. Like, when you're doing weird or creepy shit, you're making jokes like that, your kid can tell what's going on. Like, kids are very smart. Like, watch a kid. Just look at a kid and watch them learn. They're very, very, very perceptive to things like that. Just don't make it weird. It's not about being sensitive or weird. Why would you put the idea of 6-year-olds being 6-year-olds? That's weird. And you're a pedophile, okay? You're a pedophile. You are a pedophile. And all you're thinking about is pedophilia. You're gross. Stop it.
Side effects include, but are not limited to, weight gain, headaches, reduced growth, and a significant decrease in bone density. The effects of those drugs...
You're right. I was like 6, and I remember when being felt weird.
I saw a video of a toddler crying DC she wanted a boyfriend. I thought the implications were disgusting.
Jesus. When my parents said similar shit, my grandma used to say that shit. There was this girl that used to be in the yard next to us. I remember her name was Natasha. God, and I remember my grandma pressured me so. She's like, Steve, you need to go ask her to be your girlfriend. And I was like 8 years old. And I'm like, okay, grandma. It was just like, looking back, it was like the cringiest, most autistic shit in the world. It's like, bro, what the f? And this girl mogged me too because she was like 10. She was 2 years older. So they go through puberty earlier. She's like a foot taller than me. And we just like played in the backyard. We just like ran around with sticks and hit each other and shit. Like, why am I doing this? God, so awkward and cringe and weird.
Drugs are often described as being reversible in the sense that normal development resumes once children stop taking them, but this is a dangerous oversimplification. There are few long-term studies on people who have been taking puberty blockers, but those that exist show that bone density is unlikely to entirely recover, which means a lifelong increase of the risk to break bones. Other studies have suggested that taking puberty blockers increases the risk of heart problems and may result in genital underdevelopment or fertility complications.
Don't you think there are inappropriate jokes you can make near kids because you think they're not going to understand? A little bit. It just kind of depends. I mean, it depends on the joke. Obviously, there are certain jokes that you can make around kids that they're not going to understand. But like the girlfriend thing is like a very direct and pointed thing that like people are, there's like a lot of like social expectation that goes into that the kid's probably going to pick up that there's like some weird shit. And kids are already, I'm pretty sure as early as 6 months, like kids start to notice differences between like boys and girls, like at a very early age. So when you like make the differentiation even more noticeable, like people are going to pick up on it.
Though I have to warn you that at the moment, none of those studies are particularly conclusive because the sample...
What do you think about swearing in front of your child? Listen, I don't know. I can't speak for all children. I don't give a f***. I like swear words, and I will swear in front of my kid. I think if Nathan had started to use swear words, I probably would have stopped. Because I'd be like, okay, this is negatively affecting my kid. But for whatever reason, he seemed to have a good understanding of like, these are adult words. I guess if you want to use them, we can.
Imagine people
don't use
saying
them.
that same joke, but about two boys.
True. Don't
Makes
use
it
them.
easier to understand what you're trying to say.
True. Don't use them in inappropriate. Nathan's never gotten in trouble for like cussing at school or cussing ever. I don't know if I've ever heard him cuss, but it seems like I'm able to cuss around him and he doesn't care as much. So I don't know why. But if he started cussing a lot, I'd be like, okay, well, we're gonna stop this, you know.
The sizes are small. On top of this comes the psychological problem that not entering puberty when all your peers do isn't easy to cope with either. In 2016, the American Food and Drug Administration ordered makers of puberty blockers to add a warning about mental health problems to the drug's label after they received several reports of suicidal thoughts in children who were taking them. So clearly you want to have a good reason to...
I've been watching your content since 2014. Love your work. I have the money/ability to move to the USA and I would like to. What states do you recommend that you consider worthwhile setting up a life in?
Bro, I can't make that decision for you. Look at him. I don't know what kind of life you want to set up. Damn.
Child through this. Unfortunately, the evidence that puberty blockers actually improve the mental health of children presenting with gender dysphoria is slim. Some studies have found a small benefit in the reduction of suicidal tendencies, but these studies didn't have control groups, so the benefit might have come simply from receiving a treatment and being cared for. Other studies have found that puberty blockers given to kids with severe and persistent gender dysphoria had no significant effect on thoughts of self-harm or body image. The UK's National Institute for Health did a systematic review of the literature in 2020 and found that the results of the reviewed studies were of very low certainty and that the studies suggest little change with puberty blockers from baseline to follow-up in gender dysphoria, mental health and psychosocial impact. They also say that, quote, studies that found differences in outcomes could represent changes that are either of questionable clinical value or the studies themselves are not reliable and changes could be due to confounding
How often do you sleep with men asking for a friend?
Ask your mom.
Chance, end quote. Let's then look at hormone therapy that replaces the hormones of the assigned gender with that of the chosen gender. This is usually done at the age of 16 to 18 or so much later than the usual onset of puberty. When hormone therapy is later discontinued, some characteristics such as skin texture, muscle mass, and fat deposition are partly reversible. Others are not. Adam's apple protrusion, voice changes, male pattern baldness, and breast development are irreversible once developed. Yeah, once your hair's gone, even estrogen won't make it come back. Sorry, guys. The effects of
Why would you want to make
hormone therapy
inappropriate jokes around your kids? That's weird to me.
I mean, it depends on the dynamic of the people. It might be adults that regularly make inappropriate jokes. I would say probably the most inappropriate jokes that end up getting made around kids are usually going to be like double entendres. Like a kid might say something and not realize it as a sexual connotation, and like two parents might laugh about it. It'll usually be stuff like that. You're not usually like making full on like deep throat jokes around your kid. It'll be like you're. Like a kid might like get into a car and be like, "Hey mom, did dad come today?" And like mom and dad like might laugh at each other. That would be like a joke, like a dirty joke you make around a kid because the kid like doesn't realize what they're saying. But you're not gonna be like, you're not gonna be making full on like crazy jokes on your kid, obviously.
Are presently unclear. Does it benefit the well-being of transgender people? Just a few months ago, a team of American researchers published the results of a study on gender-affirming hormone therapy in adolescents. They followed 315 transgender and non-binary participants aged 12 to 20.
I don't think teen girls experience dysphoria. They're uncomfortable with being objectified as women, while trans men are uncomfortable with being perceived as men altogether.
Last a pussy. Also mute donos you fuck.
Similar but not the same, right? I don't know. I've never gone through female puberty, so I can't. It's hard for me to have like a strong opinion on it. But like from what I've heard from women is that like sometimes going through puberty as a woman, you kind of like they completely just start to hate your body. Like you just hate everything about your body, and you like want to go back, and it's just like the whole process.
Did you
can
mean
be like
ask
very
my dad if you
uncomfortable
sleep
at
with
times.
men? You're very handsome, by the way.
Thanks. How's your mom? But also, what do I know? I'm not a fucking woman. I never.
For 2 years. In the abstract, they claim they found an increase in reported appearance congruence, that is, how well the participants felt their gender aligned with their appearance, positive affect, and life satisfaction. They also found a decrease of depression and anxiety symptoms. These decreases are statistically significant, but that doesn't mean they're large. Life satisfaction, for example, increased by 2.3 points per year on a 100-point scale, and depression scores decreased by 1.3 points per year.
Remember, statistically significant just means that we can say with a high level of confidence there is an effect, right? So for instance, people mix this up a lot. People think statistically significant, wow, they mean significant result, right? We can get a high degree of confidence, for instance, that second-born children are statistically significantly more intelligent than first-born children, right? But it could just be an effect of it could just be 1. The IQ point difference could be 1, right? Now we can measure this with high precision and say, theoretically, right? Okay, there is a statistically significant increase in IQ between a second child and a first child. That doesn't mean a lot. That just means that with a high degree of certainty, we can say there is a difference, but the effect could still be very, very, very small. All right.
On a 63-point scale. You might say that's better than nothing, but these numbers in and of themselves don't tell you anything because the study didn't have a control group. Many previous studies have found that life satisfaction in this age group on average declines, which makes you think they either had a non-representative sample to begin with, or the fact of being treated itself had a positive effect. If you look closer at their data, it also turns out that the researchers only saw the psychological improvements for anxiety, depression, and life satisfaction among those designed female at birth, but not among those designed male at birth, a fact that, interestingly enough, isn't mentioned in the abstract. The authors speculate that the reason may be that they only followed the participants for 2 years, but it usually takes longer for trans girls to grow breasts of a decent size. So maybe it just takes longer for the benefits to become apparent. They also point out that social acceptance of trans women and trans men is different. Maybe that's the right explanation, or maybe not. As we've seen previously, young women on average suffer from more mental health problems than boys. And a 2019 meta-analysis of 27 randomized placebo-controlled trials found that testosterone treatment is associated with a significant reduction in depressive symptoms in men. So maybe the hormones did it, but does it have anything to do with a gender transition? Another issue pointed out by Jesse Singal is that the variables analyzed in the paper are not those they'd said they'd analyze in the pre-registered protocol. This means they had an opportunity to cherry-pick their results, which...
That's really scary and probably not good. Oh God, how to explain this? I should have a research in here for this. When you set out to do a study, you should have in mind the variables you want to compare and what you want to look for. But you have to be very, very, very careful about, let's say you do a study, you try to measure 2 things and it's not working. If you go back and you start digging through your data looking for anything that might be interesting, then oftentimes it's easy to fabricate oh my God, well I just noticed this thing. There's a more statistically important reason why that is the case, and it has to do with computing. Oh God, I'm not gonna be able to explain it because I don't even fully understand. Well, I just know you can't do that. You shouldn't. Am I talking about p hacking, where when you calculate a p-value, that doesn't mean you can go back in and do it over and over and over again with the same calculation or something, but you would have to recalculate it for every single, just don't do that. You can't do that. It's not good to do that. That's all I'll say, okay? I can't explain it any better because I don't understand it better. I just know you're not supposed to do that.
Makes their measure of statistical significance.
Who joined? Oh, it's
it
Abby.
Just sounded like you wanted help explaining p-hacking.
Yeah, go for it. Explain that.
Yeah. All right. So p-hacking is when there's what a p-value is the probability that we would expect results at least this extreme, assuming our model assumptions are correct. So there's, and that's per test. So each test gives you, let's say, a 0.5. There's a 5% probability where you put your cutoff and your threshold for statistical significance. You can imagine if you were to run that test over and over and over again with different variables, you're going to eventually hit one by chance that's going to cross that threshold, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the classic example is with like jelly beans, right? Like you'll have jelly beans and you'll look at a given health outcome and nothing turned up. So then you go back, the researchers go back, and then they say, well, let's look at the jelly bean colors. Let's do the same test for yellow jelly beans and green jelly beans and purple jelly beans and red jelly beans. And it turns out that the red jelly beans were associated with just a statistically significant difference in a given health outcome. And then what makes the news article? The news article is like, oh, red jelly beans, my gosh. But really, when you dig through it, it's just, well, there's no correction for this issue of p-hacking. Now, there are ways of addressing that. So first off, you don't want to do this post hoc, and if you do it post hoc, you want to say in research that you've done it post hoc.
Yeah. So I think in relation to, I don't know how much you're watching this, but like this lady is talking about the researchers set out to study one thing and they ended up not finding what they want, but then they went through their same results and then they found something else. And they essentially said like,
yeah,
oh, well, look, yeah. So that's kind of like...
She's half parroting. I'm familiar with this, and I'm familiar with the person she's parroting. She's parroting Jesse Signal. So Jesse Signal is a journalist who writes critical pieces about various
trans stuff. Yeah, he's been on stream a couple times. We talked to him.
Yeah. And by the way, there are certain things, and I'm not saying everything he's saying is wrong. He makes some good points. I don't think he's right about everything, and I'm happy. I've been actually trying to talk to him about some of the things he said about the better studies. But anyway, so she's parroting Jesse Signal, and the impression that, based on the way she's saying this, is that the authors just went over and back and just didn't commit to their protocol, and they only analyzed the things, or at least reported the things that looked good. We don't actually know that, and it's unfortunate that we don't know that, but we can't come to that conclusion. There's actually a lot of different possible reasons why certain things are reported and not. One of which is just journal restrictions. Sometimes, like, reviewers or editors of a journal will say, look, we get your protocol. You pre-registered all of these different things, but it's just cluttering up the journal. We only have so many pages where we're going to let you publish. Here are what we believe are the most relevant ones. You're allowed to publish this. If you don't like it, go to another journal. Right? So that's one example where it's not ideal, but it's not the authors going in and just data dredging. And they haven't shown that that's not the case.
Okay.
There's some other, but yeah, look, I mean, it's unfortunate that the journal doesn't have an explanation if that was the case, but I will tell you that's pretty standard for those explanations to not be there, which is just a broad, unfortunate state of research in general, rather than anything specific to transgender research.
Could the authors just not make that apparent or say something about that?
No, I mean, they can if they wanted to go on record outside of the journal. Yes. Oftentimes they don't want to do that because, well, if they do that, then all of a sudden they'll just... A lot of these authors are not they're not on social media, and then all of a sudden they get a full flood of everything. Well, why did you do this? Why did you do that? Blah, 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 blah. But so here's one thing I'll say. A lot of the criticisms you're going to see, some are good. Some of the criticisms in this video are good. Some of the criticisms are the type of criticisms that it's made to look like it's something unique about transgender research, when really this is just a general overall problem with research in general of this type.
Sure, I run into that a lot when people criticize social sciences and they immediately bring up replication crisis like it's unique to social sciences, when it's something that kind of plagues all peer-reviewed research or whatever.
Yeah, and then it's unfortunate that I think what I consider to be the strongest studies in favor of gender-affirming surgeries are just completely not addressed in the video. I mean, Jesse Signal has one little Reddit thing where he gives a very poor hand-wavy dismissal of it, when really it's the strongest study in favor of it.
Sure. I haven't seen I I obviously haven't finished watching this video, but it seems like she's being pretty fair. Like, it doesn't feel like she's very partisan or.
No. I don't think she's being. I don't think she's being unfair. I just think what she's doing is she's read a bunch of Jesse Signal articles, and she's just. And I think Jesse Signal is not completely unfair either. So I think she's coming off fair because of that. I don't think she's deeply familiar with the literature.
Oh, maybe. Okay. What do you want, Kelly?
Hello.
Hello.
So I don't necessarily think that she's being unfair, but there is a mistake that a lot of people seem to make when they're making these conversations, and it's an oversimplification of the medications that they're talking about. Because puberty blockers, and I've said this before, is a misnomer, right? That's not a class of drugs. It's a lot of drugs under a variety of different classes that all have very different side effects. And even in this conversation, she's accusing drugs of having the negative side effects of all of them being applicable to one, right? So she says, oh, these drugs can cause heart problems and also bone density issues. Well, spironolactone, for example, helps with your heart. It's literally a diuretic. But it can potentially give you bone issues, but she's kind of implying that both of these things can be true at once. And it's...
Okay, Kelly, when people say puberty blockers, they generally are referring to one class of medication called GnRH agonists.
But that's not all trans people take. Spironolactone is a really common one that trans women take.
For puberty blocking or for gender-affirming?
It's for both. It's an anti-androgen.
No, I understand. But when people are specifically talking about blocking puberty, I'm not talking about like medications to affirm one's gender. So I understand spironolactone
permanently banned me from the subreddit and didn't give a reason.
Yeah, and it's an anti-androgen. The point is that when people
I probably banned you then.
about causing bone density issues, which spironolactone is one that can do that, they're also conflating heart issues with that too, even though it's a diuretic that literally helps your heart.
No, I understand. I'm just making the point that when people talk about puberty blockers specifically, not gender-affirming hormone therapy, they're not typically including spironolactone as opposed to the main drug class that's being talked about is GnRH agonist.
They should be referring to GRNH if they are talking about GnRH, considering there's like a variety of other drugs in that. And also, additionally, all of these drugs, regardless of which class they are multi-use, right? So it's not like these drugs that only exist for these things.
Yeah, so GnRH agonists. So, yeah, I mean, she could have said GnRH. I mean, she did say specific. If I recall correctly, she did mention certain specific ones.
Right.
But GnRH agonists are used to, block puberty in, not just transgender people. It's in precocious puberty as well.
It's used for a variety of other things.
Yeah, they can be used in. They can be used in certain, like in prostate cancer.
Yes.
They can be used, and they're used differently in fertility. And they're not given. They're given in a more pulsatile way instead of in a continuous way. It's a different. But yeah, see, they're used for different purposes. Yes, but
even if we're talking about even if we're only talking about that class of drugs, even within that singular class, there are different side effects, right? So it's like. It's irritating for me when this all gets oversimplified.
Can we, to some extent, isn't the simplification going to happen? Advocate, correct me if I'm wrong, but for instance, or I'm almost positive I'm not wrong. There is no such thing as a drug called chemotherapy, right? Chemotherapy is usually a collection of drugs, and there are tons of different regimens of chemotherapy.
Chemo is the treatment, yeah.
Yeah, so if somebody says when chemotherapy can have these side effects, there's probably a ton of drugs that are used broadly speaking under chemotherapy, some of which might even counter some of those exact side effects that are being listed, right? I'm sure as part of some regimens, I'm sure you're taking things that are anti-nausea medication or whatever, but nobody would say, well, you can't say that chemotherapy causes nausea because one of the drugs that are part of the protocol for this particular course of chemotherapy is an anti-nausea drug. Probably broadly speaking, these are things. My guess is going to be that...
I agree with that. I think it's fair to say okay, well, as a class, chemotherapy, we can say with confidence, chemotherapy drugs, they almost always cause XYZ. And the same thing can be said for GnRH agonists when given in a pill style versus continuous manner.
As we've already gone over, even within that class of drugs, there are different side effects to each individual drug. But even then, all right, well, when people are talking too generally, it ends up being very fear-mongery because it ends up looking like all of the drugs under the bracket of puberty blockers
Well, but what's
causes
probably
all
going to be the
same
case
side
is
effects.
what's probably going to be the case is that's probably true though. What happens is, what's probably true is that if you are on puberty blockers for gender-related reasons, whatever regimen you end up taking is probably going to like adversely affect your bone density or adversely affect these other things that people are talking about when they talk about quote-unquote puberty blockers. Would be my guess.
Well, I specifically came to talk to like at the heart issues, because people get very scared when you're like, oh, these are gonna fuck up your heart, and it's just stupid.
Well, because broadly
some
speaking,
of them literally help your heart.
But if you were talking, if you were talking about putting a person on these drugs for gender-affirming care and not for the other ways that they're prescribed, they probably do have detrimental effects on the heart, right? Which is the only thing that really matters.
No, that doesn't make sense. How would a diuretic? What?
Because my guess is for gender-affirming care, you're not just prescribing a diuretic. That would be nonsensical. That's not the only thing you're doing. It's probably in combination with other drugs and the full suite of drugs that you get as part of your hormone treatment or gender-affirming care. That suite of drugs probably causes deleterious effects to the heart.
It's a fairly weak diuretic, but it's still a diuretic, and it's an anti-androgen. And as a trans woman, you could just take spironolactone if you wanted to. You would still have to keep an eye on, because the bigger issue actually, other than bone density, is making sure that your potassium levels don't get too high, so you can't be eating bananas every day. But
I didn't do nothing.
I'm just a little
checked.
Kelly, when what
I take 2 anti-androgens.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to. When you say this medication causes a heart issue, are you talking about GnRH agonists as a class, or are you talking about spironolactone specifically? She's been
using the term puberty blockers, of which spironolactone gets included in as a discussion, and she said she conflated all of the side effects. That's why I'm saying that being overgeneralistic is problematic.
I guess I just never.
Please make the joke again.
Maybe this is a learning point
the
for
one
me.
where you slept with my mom.
Understood spironolactone.
I cannot breathe. It is so funny.
As a puberty blocker, as opposed to just a gender-affirming.
It's an anti-androgen.
I know it's an. I understand. Believe me, I understand. It's an anti-androgen. You don't have to say that to me. I prescribe spironolactone more times than I can count. I know it's an anti-androgen, but that doesn't make not all anti-androgens are puberty blockers.
Well, if you want something to reduce your testosterone levels,
that doesn't mean it's a puberty. That doesn't mean it's not all things that reduce testosterone is a puberty blocker.
It's
not in the way GnRH agonists are.
The point puberty blockers is a misnomer. That's my issue. That is the entire issue with this.
In what sense is it a misnomer?
Well, so it seems like a puberty blocker is something that literally blocks all endogenous male hormones, right? Or all endogenous hormones.
It'll go like it'll go.
Whereas an anti-androgen is literally just blocking the conversion of testosterone to DHT or whatever.
Or at the receptor level, it'll interfere with it in some degree. But they'll still be. You're still going to have a decent amount of androgen activity even with Spiro. Like you can. There's plenty of time. It doesn't block puberty much.
It's included under this terminology, which is why I think that it's confusing.
Can you show me? Well, maybe this is a learning point for me. Can you show me?
I mean, if you Google like medication for trans women, spironolactone's the top of like.
Wait, hold on. My medication for trans women, right? Like ibuprofen might be given to trans women. That doesn't necessarily make it a puberty blocker. But stop. Here's the question: if you take spironolactone, is that going to block somebody's puberty?
If you block the
my understanding is spironolactone is not effective. It's not effective at blocking puberty.
Yeah, I don't think spironolactone will block puberty, so I don't think it's a puberty blocker.
I mean, you wouldn't use it for precocious puberty, and you wouldn't use it in men, obviously, because
it's not effective in blocking puberty in transgender.
I mean, in women.
I just mean it wouldn't block puberty. Period.
If you're a, never mind, I'm confused. Wait, what did you say?
It wouldn't block puberty.
The point is, these medications are used under that branch of terminology discussion.
I'm asking you to show me that. Where is it standard terminology to refer to spironolactone as a puberty blocker? I've never heard this.
I can show you multiple places where I've seen it. Also,
I'm asking. That's what I'm asking you.
All right. Well, we can look. What are commonly used medications for transition? You didn't like that search. Do you want me to do
Well,
something
commonly
else?
used medication for transitions could include puberty blockers and non-puberty blockers, like spironolactone.
Yeah, everyone
Okay,
agrees that
quick
it's a commonly used medication for
Quick
transition.
question. If GnRH is exactly the only thing that we're talking about, and ignoring the fact that different GnRH medications do have different side effects, then why not just say GnRH?
Because it probably sounds different than puberty blocking, and not everybody knows what that means.
Well, again, the reason that puberty blockers is a misnomer because even of GnRH, they have different multi-uses. So they're not just puberty blockers.
Well, but spironolactone doesn't sound like a puberty blocker at all. It just sounds like something that blocks conversion of androgen to or testosterone to dihydro or whatever.
It blocks androgens at the receptor level. It doesn't prevent the conversion really. But the point is that it's not.
I'm sorry.
Something
This
that will
is
block puberty.
different types. I'm sorry. So finasteride apparently blocks.
Yeah,
the conversion.
finasteride and dutasteride would block conversion from testosterone to dihydrotestosterone.
Gotcha. So that's a reductase inhibitor versus the other ones. Okay.
Yeah,
the latter can be
that's a
steroids.
5-AR. Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
But none of those are puberty blockers. Yeah, not finasteride, dutasteride, spironolactone. None of they're anti-androgens, but they're not going to block puberty.
I'm just saying they get included in the conversations.
You keep saying wait, but
if
you keep
they
saying,
didn't, they wouldn't they would call them GnRH, wouldn't they? And even
No,
again, it doesn't
not
matter
necessarily.
because
Okay,
you're
look,
like
we understand what they're as long as we understand what they're.
No.
I understand what they're talking about. When people say puberty blockers, my understanding is the standard way of referring to that is a class of medications known as GnRH agonists, which are used in precocious puberty. They're used in blocking puberty in transgender youth. And they're used in other cases, such as managing prostate cancer in some cases, as well as certain other indications. That's the class we're talking about.
But that's not the class people talk about when they have these conversations, because if they did, it would be a lot more clear. And even then, they need to stop conflating all of the different side effects as being the potential side effects of every single medication under the branch.
On standard usage of those terms, by standard use, I mean within the medical community, my understanding is it's almost always a GnRH agonist, a class of medications. I've never heard spironolactone included as a puberty blocker.
If trans women are taking things like spironolactone or other anti-androgens quite commonly, aren't these side effects going to be considered in these discussions? Of course they are.
But again,
but that doesn't mean they're puberty blockers. Doesn't mean they're considered as side effects of a puberty blocker.
I'm saying other people include all of these drugs that aren't just GnRHs in these conversations.
Okay, that's fine. I'm not.
Have you noticed the global U.S. sterilization propaganda making the rounds lately? YT channels like the during show of Russian propaganda. Check out the ADV China podcast.
I'm making is that when we're talking about
propaganda.
puberty blockers standardly, we're talking about GnRH agonists. We're not talking about spironolactone. And the reason we're not talking about spironolactone is because it's not something that blocks puberty. It uses gender-affirming hormone therapy, sure.
Sure, but when we're having these conversations, does she ever talk about specifically outside of this, any of the classes of drugs, and to make things clearer?
Wait, I don't think we need to. What is
the side effects of all of these drugs as being a potential side effects of one single drug that you might personally end up
I think that
taking?
she's I don't think anybody thinks of it like that at all. They're just saying that in general, if a trans person goes on quote unquote puberty blockers, here are the likely side effects. And I think insofar as that's said, that's probably true.
But you can't say likely side effects if you don't know what the fucking drugs they're taking are.
He's right.
Yeah, no, of course. What do you mean? It's not like there's a random different treatment of drugs or random prescription of drugs every time somebody goes on puberty blockers, right? There's probably some standard GnRH analog or some bullshit, and there's probably some standard collection of drugs that somebody's given as a male or female to go through.
Okay, so my issue with this is, it's the lack of clarity ends up being scaremongery.
Wait, okay, hold on. So what part of this is
seem potentially worse than they are? I'm not saying that people are being intentional with
Wait, so the question is, what part of this is untrue scaremongering? What has she said that's untrue, I guess?
Because, well, if she was conflating side effects that wouldn't be the accurate for all of the drugs at once.
Wait, so what is a side effect she gave?
One.
What's a side effect that she gave that somebody going through a course of puberty preventing drugs wouldn't face? What's an example of that? Like, what's like one side effect she's given? Like, so the bone density thing.
Yeah, but not all of them are going to be hard on all of the things that she listed.
Okay, like what? Like, what's one thing?
Most of them are going to be hard on at least one of the things she listed.
Well, like, what's one side effect she listed that's probably not going to apply to most trans people?
Well, I'm having a hard time remembering all of the side effects she was listing, but she when she mentioned heart issues and bone density, that doesn't have to be true.
Okay, but
I mean, there are meta-analyses looking over GnRH agonists, not just one single medication within that class, but broadly, and they do broadly reduce bone density, and there is a link to
bone density, yes, but like heart issues and all of those meds,
and cardiovascular. No, but there's a meta-analysis of cardiovascular. There's a meta-analysis of GnRH agonists and cardiovascular.
When you start to say like in all of these drugs, you're increasing your chance of.
Look, I'm not claiming that there couldn't be. Wait, one second. I'm not claiming that one couldn't. Listen, I'm not claiming that one couldn't have a specific GnRH agonist or invent one or whatnot that wouldn't have this side effect. It's just that broadly speaking, they do have certain side effects.
And again, she didn't say GnRH anyway.
Okay,
but,
I think it's clear that's what she
there are other
said.
drugs too, and I'm just saying anyway.
Okay.
And this also kind of, by conflating all of these things, it doesn't seem to give people the thought that there could be the option to not use, for example, GnRH, but to use the other affirming care that wouldn't have those negative side effects. And I don't really understand why we don't talk about the class of drugs and the drugs specifically, because GnRH might not be applicable for people, but if we keep just using the fucking word puberty blockers, which just doesn't mean very much, then people won't be able to like consider these as options. They're just
She's not saying that everyone needs to use a puberty blocker in order to transition. She's just talking about puberty blockers as they're used.
Yeah, but she's talking about the drugs in general. I think she just started to talk about... did she just start to go into gender-affirming care?
Yeah, but notice how she said gender-affirming care and not puberty blockers now. So she's clear about talking.
I haven't heard... What has she said? Or she hasn't said much. We need to watch the video. I think she only just started that part of the conversation.
Wow.
I watched the video.
Why are you laughing? I'm asking a question.
No, I think she's clear about the medications. I've watched the video. I think she's clear about the medications.
Clear about the medications if you don't name a single one?
Because I have background knowledge about what class of medications are being referred to. By
other people don't.
Okay, maybe other people don't, but I'm saying that I do.
Okay, so she's being clear by not naming a single medication.
She's being clear to a target audience that has background information that understands that when someone says puberty blockers, they're talking about...
You think she's talking to people that have extensive knowledge on this subject?
It's the first thing in the Wikipedia. Like, you can... Anyone who looks up puberty blockers, Wiki will...
No, but you think she's talking to people that already have an extensive knowledge in the subject?
No, I think...
It does not sound like
No,
that.
I think her target audience is probably laymen who have done some amount of research.
That's my problem.
Wait, let me finish. Not just laymen who have done some amount of research on it, who are interested in the topic and are trying to get clarity. And I think those people are also...
They're trying to get clarity by her giving none. That's my point.
I don't think she's giving. All right, look.
I don't feel.
I don't want to belabor it. If we can. I mean, if you want, we can continue, but we can continue to watch the video.
I mean, we can agree to disagree. It's fine. Did you want to continue the video? I'm sorry.
Yeah, maybe that'd be good.
My bad. Okay, I will silence myself.
Okay, be careful, guys.
Obsolete. I'm not saying that that's what they did, but since they didn't adhere to the protocol, which they themselves pre-registered, it's a possibility that their results are just random noise. Another paper that is often presented by people favoring hormone treatment is one that was published in 2022 in the journal Pediatrics. They followed about 100 young Americans that were either transgender or non-binary, or at least they tried. By the end of the trial, only 64 were left. So we're talking about a really small sample. About 2/3 of the participants began a therapy either with puberty blockers or gender-affirming hormones during the trial. The remainder served as a control group. The researchers observed 60% lower odds of depression and 73% lower odds of suicidal thoughts among youths who had initiated puberty blockers or hormone therapy compared with those who had not. They saw no effect for anxiety. In case that sounds good, here's the fine print. The mental health of those who were treated did not improve. What happened instead is that the mental health of those who were not treated got worse. And in the end, the untreated control group totaled 7 people. I know as a particle physicist, I may be used to unreasonably high standards of statistical significance and sample size, but I'm not impressed. Aren't there any better studies? No, there are not. There are at present no high-quality studies that conclusively demonstrate these treatments are beneficial. The British National Health Service looked at this in 2020 and found evidence from 5 observational studies which suggest that gender-affirming hormones are likely to improve symptoms of gender dysphoria and may also improve depression, anxiety, quality of life, suicidality, and psychological functioning. But they point out that those studies didn't have control groups and that all results were of very low certainty. An often made comparison is that between transgender identity and left-handedness, which was recently popularized by the British comedian John Oliver. Until the 1970s or so, children were forced to learn to write with their right hand, until it occurred to someone to just let them write as they wanted. Rather suddenly, a lot of people switched to writing with the other hand. This had nothing to do with social contagion. It was just that now they could be who they had wanted to be all along. You expect a similar thing to happen with transgender identification, that as it becomes socially more acceptable, you see more people being comfortable being who they really are. And so the argument goes, no one would put themselves or their children through a gender transition if they didn't think it was really necessary. But, for one thing, this doesn't explain why the gender ratio of those seeking treatment for gender dysphoria has suddenly changed. And also, as much as I like John Oliver, it's an extremely unfortunate comparison. You can switch a pen from one hand to the other and back within a few seconds and without lasting consequences. Puberty blockers and hormone therapies are not as easy to undo, and we don't understand the long-term consequences. In summary, what I take away from the data is that the sudden increase in the number of teenagers identifying as transgender is both real and substantial. It's also clear that the demographic group is markedly shifting, now heavily skewed towards those assigned female at birth, many of which present with other mental health disorders. Evidence that those children would benefit from puberty blockers or hormone therapy is slim, with large uncertainties. The side effects can be substantial, and the long-term consequences are mostly unknown. Just exactly what is going on, no one really knows, but the reasonable expectation is that the current increase in reports of gender dysphoria is caused by a mixture of 2 causes. Young people are more comfortable being openly trans, and some of them erroneously believe they are trans because they've heard so much about it. I'd say that anyone who insists that one of those possibilities doesn't exist is pushing an agenda and shouldn't be taken seriously. The question is, how do you tell these 2 possibilities apart? This is currently unclear, and this is why countries like Sweden, Finland, and the UK are asking doctors to hold back with prescriptions, because at the moment they don't know how to deal with the sudden surge of girls presenting with gender dysphoria, and they don't want to do any harm. So what do you think? Do you have children in that age group and are worried about them? Are you transgender and see the situation differently? Let me know in the comments.
Wow.
Gender dysphoria, like most questions of mental and physical health, is a sensitive topic. And if you're looking for information online, you sometimes don't want to leave a trail. Our sponsor, NordVPN, can help protect your privacy while you do your...
Okay, that's kind of a funny ad plug. Like, are you looking for stuff about trans people? Don't let anybody know. Like,
research. NordVPN is an app that you install on your phone or laptop.
So you'll notice one of the things she says is she talks about the attrition rates in some of the studies. Like this is another example. Like the
attrition rate has to do with how many people are from the start to the end of a study, right?
Yeah, your dropout.
Yeah, there were some of these. I'm going to admit I might be a little bit poisoned because I read a lot of Jesse's write-ups as well. But obviously I think Jesse's a little obsessed with trans people. But I do think that it's interesting sometimes that attrition rate isn't like front and center for some of these studies. Like when you get 150 people entering and like 80 of them drop out, it feels like the sample that's left might be like heavily biased towards a certain result for the study, you know?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just giving a general principle. Yeah. So in that case, like, okay, well, it's questionable what kind of inferences you can make from the end of that study. Although there are multiple endpoints a lot of times in some studies, and you can say, okay, well, what about the mid endpoint? How much did you have there?
Mm-hmm.
Also, the questions to ask when you see things like that are: is there a discrepancy in the attrition? So, is your treatment group dropping out at a differential rate of your control group, or is it more or less the same? And also, why do you have such a high dropout rate?
Hey, you banned me for saying you were making a bad analogy.
Is it actually high? Is the dropout rate high in this field of research?
How can I unban you? I don't even know your name.
Because I don't see it always being said about, you 80% dropped out. Sometimes I'll see people, I believe Jesse said this too about certain studies.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, there was like 30%. But there's plenty of research out there where you have 30% dropout rate.
Yeah, it gets one thing that I notice. I try to ask myself this question all the time when I'm seeing something, especially with something that I want to believe, because you always have to worry. Like, what is the comparison to the norm? It was just I noticed this in my last 2 years with Donald Trump that I had to start asking this a lot, where somebody would report something like Donald Trump fires head of whatever. Donald Trump fires, and I was like, damn, this motherfucker firing everybody. And in some cases it was like pretty exceptional, right? Like how often he'd chew through his not Homeland Security, your State Department heads and stuff, or like Comey or whatever. But other times it's just like administrations oftentimes switch around a lot of people. So like the question isn't like, is it horrible that Donald Trump is firing all these people? It's what's like the normal fire rate for a president, a newly incoming administrator versus the last one, right? Because Obama replaced a lot of people too. And I'm finding that like asking questions like that can be really important in terms of figuring out, like when the COVID vaccine stuff came out, people are like, oh, they're not publishing their whatever. And it's like, rather than saying like, oh my God, they didn't publish that, it must be evil. The question should be, well, how often is it that people do publish that? Because if people never publish it and then they didn't, then okay, that'd be expected. But if people always publish it and it didn't, well, that's a really strong point. You should be bringing that out too, you know?
Yeah, and exactly. The same thing is with this point about the protocol stuff. So a lot of times, like pre-registered endpoints in a protocol may not make it to a paper for non like terrible reasons, journal demands or whatnot. And by the way, it is pretty standard for the authors to just not say that.
Sure.
It's unfortunate. I don't agree with that, but that's not something unique about transgender literature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well.
Anyway, it's good talking.
Hey, Abby,
what's up?
Doctor are you?
Oh, I'm in dermatology.
Dermatology? Oh, cool. Mm-hmm. I was kind of hoping you would be endocrinology, but it's okay.
No. No, I'm not an endocrinologist. I have endocrinologist colleagues. Is the implication there? I'm not.
The implication is that you're a fucking retard. I don't even know if dermatologists go to medical school. Do you? Imagine being a physician and not even being. Did you even take a fucking? Do you even know what endocrinology means? You fucking retard.
Is like the implication that
do prescribe spironolactone, but that wasn't why I was asking. Because I got mine from the
no. Is the implication that like
no. I have health issues. Okay. I'm
just curious. Like, is the implication that like because is that dermatologists like are precluded from having a view or learning about transgender medicine? Like, is that the?
No, it's literally selfish. It's more useful to me.
What, you're going to ask for medical advice? You're going to ask a doctor for, hey, can you give me medical advice on the internet? Look, you think that's a smart idea?
I'm desperate at this point, all right? Okay. So, like,
I see. You want me to give you
like, okay, just hear me out. Hear me out. Like, okay,
You know I can't do that though, right?
No, you can't give me advice, but you can listen to what I'm gonna say.
I can listen to you, yeah, that's fine.
Also, I don't want like specific advice anyway. But last week, just over a week ago, I started to get petechial rashes, like the burst blood vessels, and I've also for the last couple weeks had like ominous bruises from like not hitting myself. And how do I scare doctors into giving me help that's not waiting 2 months? Because like my rheumatologist appointment is 2 months away.
Did you see your primary care doctor?
Yeah, I spoke to them last week.
And they gave you the referrals?
Yeah, they wrote an email to my rheumatologist. And they said, oh, we'll make it urgent. And I got an appointment today for 2 months away.
Okay. Yay. All right, are you in
Bongerland? She is.
Yeah, like you.
Yeah, the NHS is very slow. Unless you're literally in the hospital about to die, then it's very tedious getting help. And I have multi-discipline issues, so the doctors can't even agree which doctor I need to go see half the time.
All right, well, it sounds like you have your referrals. I mean, you're in a situation where it's a little bit longer of a wait time, which is unfortunate.
But is there no way to speed it up beyond just going to the hospital and dying?
Well, you don't want that. Like, you don't want... No, I mean, look. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, any country is going to have a tiered system of urgency, and like the fact that you're not dying immediately, or you're dying in anytime soon, probabilistically.
I guess so, but underskin bleeding's kind of
probably
scary, isn't it?
I mean, I see a lot of petechial rashes. Not every.
Really?
Yes. I mean, that's probably a selection bias because they come to me, but there's most people with petechial rashes aren't dying anytime soon. So I wouldn't. I'm not. That's not to say that petechial rashes can't be indicative of more severe conditions, but in the majority of cases, they'll be fine.
Oh, okay, interesting. So what are like lesser conditions that could cause them, and the like weird bruising and hematomas and things that
I mean,
serious?
One thing that can do it is a self-limit is vasculitis, which is in most cases self-limited, which means it resolves on its own.
I'm ANCA negative though. That's the issue.
Not all vasculitis are ANCA negative.
Yeah,
or ANCA positive. Sorry. In fact, I wager most of the vasculitic processes I've seen are ANCA negative.
Oh, okay, that's reassuring. I am referred for a capillaroscopy at some point, but I don't know how useful that's going to be.
One thing you can do, I mean, I don't know if you can do this where you live, but if you get a rash, like if you can establish care with a dermatologist and you get a rash fresh, sometimes the dermatologist will tell you, like, listen, this is the time where we need to biopsy it. And so they'll let you come in as a walk-in just for that purpose. Like, it's like one of those exceptions.
I never have good luck. I got it when I was in fucking Japan, so I was like, cool, I can't go get a biopsy. But also, they're really unhelpful with giving you biopsies unless it's an emergency. I would definitely have to pay for that privately. But I mean, it's not an issue. I just need it to, like, not happen at a bad time, I guess. But yeah, what? Okay, so I did do some research into vasculitis, but what are, like, common ones that aren't ANCA positive? Because I'm kind of struggling.
Yeah, just leukocytoclastic vasculitis.
Okay, I did read a little on that. I don't know if it fits with the other symptoms that I have is the issue, but fingers crossed, I guess. Alright, I feel bad for monopolizing you now, but bro, just trying to get to talk to a doctor who's not like...
Destiny, it's Isaiah Benjamin. I guess you wanted me to donate it.
They just don't care.
Then I replied to you multiple times when you asked.
So I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you.
No problem.
My bad.
Cool. Well, I'm glad we got to the bottom of that, guys.
Kind of.
That's
All right,
how all of this
gaslit.
on both.
What about what?
People told me, you guys are saying, look at the Wikipedia. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'll look at Wikipedia then. On the Wikipedia page for puberty blockers, under available
I wish more
forms,
people took your approach to
it
handling
talks about
online drama. How hard is it
GnRH
for people to say, oh wait,
but then
to
it
pass
says in
judgment until more
precocious
info comes out?
puberty, you can't use GnRH. And actually, treatment possibilities for precocious puberty in boys, and it lists the anti-androgen spironolactone on the article for puberty blockers.
I don't know if treating precocious puberty is the same thing as drugs given to prevent puberty for people that are trying to transition.
But it's still on the Wikipedia page for puberty blocker. Does that make it okay that I was considering it in the conversation because other people do?
Well, if that's the case, that just hurts your point even more, because then it goes to show that people do refer to these drugs when they talk about puberty blockers, no?
No, it doesn't hurt my case, because my case was that they do include spironolactone and other drugs. It's not just spironolactone.
Well, but then in that case, doesn't that make everything the lady said even more correct then? Because it seems like people do include like spiro whatever for...
No, it doesn't make it more correct, because she was conflating a whole lot of side effects that aren't all accurate for each individual drug.
She's not conflating every side effect for every drug. She's just saying that for these group of drugs, here are potential side effects.
No, she wasn't. She was very unspecific. That's the issue.
Of course you're unspecific. If I say like psychedelics in general can cause you to hallucinate, they can cause you to lose sense of time, and then I give you like 5 or 6 or 7 psychedelic drugs, that doesn't mean that every single drug will have every single side effect. It just means for these group of drugs, here are side effects that are likely. But some might have completely opposite side effects, right?
But I mean, that's the issue, right?
That's not an issue, though. You can still speak broadly, but you can still speak broadly about like side effects for classes of drugs.
Do you not think that that's like a problem, though, if we're speaking so broadly about such a complex issue a lot of the time? At least I feel like you could put in...
What is like, okay, if we're speaking broadly, give me like one negative outcome from speaking this way. I don't understand.
Because those side effects aren't accurate for each individual drug, and people are gonna think, oh, I don't want to let my kid even take these things, because they think they're gonna get all the potential side effects of all of these drugs when they're not even a potential side effect for some of these drugs in the first place. Okay,
then that means that nobody would give anybody like any drug ever.
Well, no, the thing is, we are very ignorant in generally speaking to the side effects of all of our drugs, right? If people cared this much about the hormonal...
Well, no, I'm just saying for like every drug.
Right?
Like, I'm pretty sure like acetaminophen can cause like bleeding into the heart in like really rare cases or whatever. Like, I don't think anybody would be like, oh my God, there's a side effect, I'm not gonna give a drug. Like, you would still listen to doctors and stuff.
I think a better comparison would be how we don't really seem to care that much about the side effects that women get from birth control, right? Like, we don't sit around and talk about it, but there's just as many negative side effects for it, and plenty of girls take birth control, pretty young. I started on it when I was 15. So if we're gonna make these kinds of contrasts, yeah, but then to me that is weird that we care so much about the side effects of what trans kids might get when we don't care about nearly as much the same side effects that cis kids might get.
Wait, in what case do we not care about the side effects? What are you talking about?
You think people freak out this much over a 15-year-old girl taking a birth control as they do a trans kid taking a...
I think that women talk about side effects from birth control literally all the fucking time. Yeah.
There is absolutely
I don't think I've ever heard of a woman not complain about side effects from her birth control. What do you mean? But oftentimes the side effects are worth not getting pregnant.
There is not this much hysteria for like a 15-year-old taking a birth control.
There's not correct. There's not as much hysteria, but that's because when you're considering the efficacy of a medication, you've got the primary effect and the side effects. Primary effect of the trans drug is for somebody to be transitioning or whatever, right? Which is still hotly debated. The primary effect of hopefully birth control is to not get pregnant. So that's seen as a highly desirable outcome. So of course people are going to be more willing to tolerate certain side effects, right?
I mean, I took birth control so that I didn't kill myself because...
What is the point of the comment that you're making right now? What does it have to do with what I just said? Wait, can you...
If you let me fucking finish...
No, you're not even engaging what I just said. You just like went on to a next sentence that had absolutely no connection with what I just said. It wasn't even remotely related.
Explain how it's related?
Go ahead.
I took it because testosterone levels in me being high but not great made me suicidal. I get the impression that a lot of trans kids are also suicidal and wish to adjust the hormones accordingly.
I'm waiting for this to relate to what I said.
Well, shouldn't they get the chance to do that? Because you use the... What did you just use the word when referring to trans kids medication?
I said that the primary...
Allegedly or something. You're skeptical. The skepticism.
Yeah, there's lots of skepticism. It's not a very studied area of research. Of course, there's tons of skepticism.
Yeah, but I feel like people should be either this equally skeptical to all fucking medication, or they should be doing more research of their own and to understand these medications and have a normal level of skepticism when it comes to trans.
There's going to be different levels of... Why do you think people are, like, people are going to be hyper skeptical of a drug that they don't see having a positive primary effect? Do you understand that?
Is the trans kids not killing themselves not a good enough effect?
First of all, the research even supporting reduction of suicidality is still tenuous for children, especially. But secondly, no, a lot of people don't even believe that trans shit is real. So of course the pushback to those drugs is going to be a lot more severe than for birth control, because most people believe that pregnancy is real. Most people believe that birth control can prevent people from getting pregnant. So of course they're going to be more willing to accept side effects on that drug because they see like an obvious positive outcome.
Okay. Although I will say that the list of negative side effects of the birth control are incredibly lengthy, so sometimes not getting pregnant isn't always the best in that option. But even
if
still,
that's the case, then you don't take the birth control. Yeah, that's
that's my point. I'm not trying to cause hysteria.
No. That wasn't your point. Your point was nobody talks about the side effects of birth control. Everybody talks about the side effects of birth control. Like everybody.
There's not the same. I don't even think that's true.
Well, you were about to say it's not the same.
Into it. There isn't hysteria, no, because we're not like narrowing it.
There's not hysteria because people like not getting pregnant. There's the primary effect is seen as incredibly positive. So of course there's not hysteria.
So the only difference is the argument around whether there is the benefit.
Sure, because a lot of these people don't even believe that trans people are real. So of course they're not as keen on accepting side effects for the drugs.
I don't know how to engage with isn't real as if they're fairies. Like I don't.
As in they're not actually experiencing gender. They're not experiencing gender dysphoria. They're having some other problem that could be fixed through therapy or some other means.
Why do we have to consider that point of view?
Well, because you're asking me why people feel some way about some things and people feel other ways about other things. I'm telling you why people feel some ways about some things, and you're saying, well, I don't care how they feel about some things. And I'm trying to explain.
No, I'm not saying I don't care how they feel. I'm saying from a medical, scientific perspective, why do we have to consider that some people are weird and religious and want to put their head in the sand or whatever from this discussion point of view? I don't.
Because we're not just discussing medicine, we're discussing policy. When we're talking about like should people be like prescribed a certain thing, or how do we feel about this in like society? Like a lot of these are going to be policy questions, like tough policy questions.
So I think that there's nothing wrong with being very careful about the medications that you're taking, and I would actually advocate for a lot of things to be different, because the reason why medicine lets people down and why people suffer from negative side effects and have so many issues, right? It's because we're not teaching people. People just take meds often without reading the side effects or the considerations of them. And we don't even do a lot of things like testing people's hormones before we give them hormones. Like, there's a lot of things I would advocate for changing, but it's not all about trans-affirming care. I think there should be a lot more medical reform, honestly, in general. It's like, okay, so for example, if I had a kid and they were interested in transitioning, I probably wouldn't leave it up to the doctor to just be like yes or no and then put them on a random one. I don't even think the majority... Okay, are you aware that the birth control pill... Like, how much do you know about the birth control pill?
A decent amount? I don't know what you're asking me. What?
How many versions of the combined birth control do you think there are?
Of the combined, there's probably, my guess would be 10 plus, probably a lot.
Okay, and do you know why there's that many differences?
Probably different combinations of inactive ingredients, probably different combinations of active ingredients. I know sometimes you've got low hormone versions of birth control pills versus the normal hormone versions of birth control pills. There's probably a ton of different reasons.
Yeah, and the different variations of the hormones as well. But the majority of people don't know this, and their GP will put them on a random one. In the UK, it's usually like microgynon. And then girls will complain that either they're like mentally off, like they're depressed, or they lose their sex drive, or they're getting more problems because they've been put on the wrong one. And there's like a dozen of them, and there's like a whole spectrum of birth control.
Sure, and then I think usually they recommend that you try a different one.
Yeah, but they're picking at random. Do you get that?
Yeah, but my understanding is in general, I think you kind of have to. I don't know if we've like positively associated like different hormone profiles or genes with certain birth controls that you can like easily run a test for. Or if that exists, that's cool, but I haven't heard of that before.
It's not a gene, you could get hormone testing.
That's why the first thing I said, do you even listen to the words that I say? I can't tell.
You said genes.
I said certain hormone profiles or genes that would possibly correlate to different.
I literally just missed it.
Okay, I know. You're so excited to get to your next sentence. Okay, it's all good. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know if we've discovered those associations such that like if you have this type of hormone or this type of hormone, you'd be more predisposed to having a positive experience with this. I don't know if that exists yet. I'm not sure if that exists yet.
Well, no, that isn't true. There are definitely some birth controls that, depending on your hormone levels and also your symptoms, if you're having issues, you can be put on a better one instead of being put on a fucking random one that the GP just decides at random. Like the one that I take is also an anti-androgen, but it also has an estrogen profile that specifically will work for me, whereas all the others will not work for me, and they make things worse. So like, and I didn't need to try 3-4 birth controls to get to that point. I could have had my hormones tested and gone to a doctor that knew what the fuck they were talking about, instead of just putting me on them at random, which made a lot of things a lot worse at certain points. And that's how I feel in general to like medicine. And that's how I feel when it comes to the discussions about gender-affirming care, puberty blockers, and all those things that are related to. But, okay. We kind of went off on a tangent, which was entirely my fault. I apologize.
Okay, well. Anything else?
Anyway, you guys told me to look at the wiki, and there it fucking is, right there, under fucking puberty blocker. All right, I was right. I just felt I need to say that.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Uh-oh. Wait. Oh fuck! It's Matt.
Yeah, it's me. So I just wanted to kind of reference on the Wikipedia page. There's like 95% of that page on puberty blockers is about like the what is it, the GnRH agonists. It's like 95% of it. You have to like go down to find one reference and like 5% of it where it says there are very specific type of like early onset puberty where the GnRH.
This page is not that big.
Yeah.
Why are you saying like 90% as if it's like a fucking full-on essay here? And it's a full-on paragraph.
Well, like 2 sentences. The only point I'm making is it's saying there's
2
one
paragraphs
specific...
under available forms, and one is about non-GnRH. So half of that section is about non-GnRH.
Yeah, it's saying there's like one specific type of early onset that the GnRH is ineffective for, and that's the only time that that's being considered as a medication for it.
Okay, now I'm going to read the article.
Okay.
Hold on, now I'm reading it.
Centrally acting puberty blockers such as GnRH agonists are ineffective in peripheral precocious puberty. Yeah? Like, I don't know why you're putting this... The point is, these medications are put on a fucking article about puberty blockers, which I think makes them relevant to talk about. And they're the ones that told me to look at the wiki in the first place, okay? I wouldn't have fucking bothered otherwise.
To be fair, he did say look at the wiki and like reading like from the first paragraph. It essentially 99% is all in reference to the specific puberty blocker. I go from 90%
to 99 now.
Yeah, if you want to look, the number of references of that specific drug in the puberty blockers page is like one word, like a couple sentences out of
Yes, but I was specifically told
paragraphs.
that it was ridiculous to consider that spironolactone is considered in the discussion of puberty blockers, and it wouldn't be on this discussion at all.
Yes, okay, so it seems like it's not in the discussion of puberty blockers. Now that you made me open this and read this, it seems like this is for treating peripheral precocious puberty.
That's puberty blocking in cis kids.
one
No.
specific type, right?
No. But it's a hyper-specific type. Like technically, like the most effective puberty blocker is a knife into somebody's throat, right? That's going to block them from going through puberty. But this would never be prescribed as
God.
This would never be described as a puberty blocking drug because peripheral precocious puberty seems to be gonadotropin independent, meaning I'm guessing not affected by the hormones or whatever that are made relating to. I guess sexual development in the pituitary gland, I guess, a quick read. So this type of peripheral precocious puberty is not at all related to like a general puberty or normal puberty. So this drug, spironolactone or whatever, wouldn't be used generally for puberty blocking ever. It only works in this particular instance.
So it's precocious puberty in cis kids. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not a normal common puberty. What do you mean it's not uncommon? Yeah. What do you mean? What do you consider common?
That's not what I said.
And the video is talking about puberty blockers
relating
to like trans healthcare.
Okay. The reason that puberty blockers exist is because of this initial illness, right? And the precocious puberty is why people...
Well, hold on. No, because this is saying that a GnRH agonist will not work to stop precocious puberty because precocious puberty is being caused by things that are gonadotropin independent things. Right, so it's
I'm
not
talking
effective.
About
it says centrally acting puberty blockers such as GnRH and agonists are ineffective in treating peripheral precocious puberty.
I'm talking about why puberty blockers as a concept came about because precocious puberty is a thing.
Sure, that might be, but we're not talking about the history of puberty blockers. We're talking about puberty blockers as they exist today, right?
In reference to treating trans healthcare, right?
Again,
in which case.
But GnRH is not just, for puberty blockers. They're multi-use drugs.
That doesn't change anything that's being talked about. Almost every drug is like a multi-use drug. Like tons of drugs are used in tons of different things. I don't know why that would have any.
Well, also because they were often used for other things before they were used for puberty blockers, right?
If there's like a video where they're talking about trans healthcare and they're talking about the efficacy of things relating to trans healthcare and they're talking about puberty blockers as it relates to trans healthcare, then pointing out that there's like this rare disease where you take this one specific type of drug at the age of 1, right? Like. It's one specific kind of precocious puberty. It's not even all precocious puberty. It's like literally the type where you can like get it at age 1, which is extremely rare because most precocious puberty doesn't happen at age 1, right? So if your criticism was, I think there's, I'm having a hard time understanding exactly what's being referenced here when she's talking about puberty blockers because there's all these other specific types. Well, it sounds like the video is very clear that we're talking about like in terms of normal trans healthcare and for gender-affirming care or delaying puberty.
My point is it's not clear because she never actually specified what the fuck drug or class she was talking about.
You would never take, so even the Wikipedia article is saying you would never take that drug in relation to trans healthcare, right?
No, that's not what that says. Plenty of trans women take spironolactone, for example.
But sorry, you're right. Sorry, just to clarify, you're talking about relating to puberty blockers. Yes, relating to puberty blockers, which was the discussion.
And it sounds like you might take spironolactone, but you're also taking a GnRH agonist as well. We might
probably
guess.
Like that.
No, not probably. Always.
But you don't have to take a GnRH. That's again.
Okay, so you're telling me that if you're a trans person, you can take spironolactone, and that in and of itself will give you the results you want.
I think in a lot of situations it would be better not to also use the puberty blocker too. Yeah, like everybody's different, right? And puberty blockers, or I should specify GnRH, are not applicable or the best option for everybody.
When the conversation's over puberty blockers and their effectiveness for trans healthcare, then if you're pointing out like, oh, there's this other type of trans healthcare that's not a puberty blocker that people are using, that everyone understood that, right? The specific conversation was saying it does not seem like this drug is used in reference to any sort of trans healthcare for puberty blocking. And you were the one saying, well, I'm confused by Sabine's usage of this term because there exists this drug that's not applicable at all for this purpose.
Or even, we can even go to our hated HRT, do-it-yourself HRT directory that we tried to get shut down, and we can read what they say. Spironolactone is quite a weak anti-androgen, albeit quite safe. Common side effects include thirst, salt cravings, and frequent urination. It can be taken alongside a regular HRT regimen as an experimental erection prevention drug. If getting erections is bothersome due to blood pressure lowering effects, not recommended as first choice of anti-androgen due to its weak anti-androgenic effects. If you're currently taking spironolactone and your total T levels are under 30 nanograms per deciliter, you can almost certainly stop taking Spiro at this point because the estradiol, I can't pronounce these words. Estradiol, how do you pronounce that one? Is doing most of the work suppressing your T. So it sounds like even on the do-it-yourself HRT wiki, it doesn't seem like this is like recommended as. I don't think you can use just this. It sounds like you're going to be using this in common with some other drugs.
I mean, it's going to be heavily dependent on the person, right?
No, it doesn't seem to be the case at all.
Not everyone takes the same drugs, and not.
No. I didn't say everyone takes the same drugs. What I'm saying is, I don't think there are any trans women that are only taking spironolactone.
I don't know that. Why do you think you know that?
Because it doesn't seem like it would do what you want. It doesn't stop. It doesn't. It's not giving you the hormones that you need.
Not all men are going to be as high in testosterone levels or other hormone levels as each other, right? And they might not all be seeking the same effect, and they might.
Stop. Hold on. You're just saying random shit now. They're not all. If somebody just wants to suppress their T or whatever, then fine, maybe they'll take this. But that's not puberty blocking, and that's not even trans drugs. You're just on some weird femboy shit at that point. That's not even what we're talking. We're not even talking about trans people at that point.
I just came to point out that it was on the Wikipedia under available forms in a discussion about puberty blockers.
No, it's literally not. It's exactly not there. It is exactly not under blocking puberty. It's blocking a very particular type of precocious puberty, which is peripheral precocious puberty.
It's under available forms on puberty blockers, and puberty blockers, that word is used for precocious puberty.
Are you really? You're reading this like in the most retarded possible way ever.
Puberty blocker isn't a term that came up for trans-affirming care. It was a term that existed prior.
Do you think Sabine, in that video, talking about trans healthcare, when she references gender, fucking puberty blockers,
like the reason why I want people to be more clear is because of
are you telling me that you seriously believe that Sabine is possibly referring to this drug as a puberty blocker, and you're thinking that people are getting confused about this?
My point is
when it's not, this drug is not, even in the reference that you brought to the stream, your own reference is pointing out that it's not used at all for trans puberty blocking. It's used for an extremely rare type of precocious puberty. So are you telling me that you're really confusing this use case of the drug with like talking about trans puberty blocking?
It's called puberty blockers. There's no trans puberty blockers. There's just puberty blockers. I don't know why you're trying to
wait, no, hold on, wait. That is not true. There are quote-unquote trans puberty blockers because it's probably puberty blockers prescribed to people for being trans. It's just like how you can have parasitic ivermectin, kind of. You might not call it that, but like a drug is just a drug. Right? A drug isn't made for a thing. You prescribe different drugs for different reasons at different dosages. This is the big problem with ivermectin. Ivermectin is common in fighting parasites, but to treat COVID-19 with ivermectin, you couldn't just use ivermectin, the anti-parasitic. You'd have to prescribe it at a much higher dose. So when we talk about puberty blockers, you can say, well, there aren't trans puberty blockers. There are regimens of puberty blocking drugs that are given to people for the purposes of making them trans or helping them with their transition. They're not just like random drugs given to anybody for any purpose. There's going to be different treatment regimens. That's not what I was
saying.
Okay, but then there are quote unquote trans puberty blockers, and that there are puberty blockers that are prescribed in dosages that are appropriate for people that are trying to be trans, rather than somebody taking it for a different reason, like say precocious puberty.
The puberty blockers under that umbrella term, regardless of whether they are better used for trans people or not, and the multi-use part in this part, it doesn't actually matter. But not all of them are like. I don't think any of them are like specific for trans affirming care or trans puberty blockers. They can't, like, plenty of the GnRH can be used for precocious puberty and other things too.
Yeah, and that's the point we're pointing out, is that even in the cases there, you're talking about the rarest possible use case of this drug and a rare time where GnRH is not effective. And none of this at all is related to trans healthcare. Puberty blockers for trans healthcare, right? And that's the contention. Your contention originally was you think Sabini should be more specific because there are all these types of puberty blockers and you can't tell what she means when she's saying them because she's not referencing them. But as we're pointing out here, even the specific instance of the drug you're pointing out is not ever used for trans puberty blocking. It's not what is referred to when we say trans puberty blocking. Puberty blockers for trans people.
Puberty blockers is a term that pre-exists this. That's the point.
That's not relevant,
when we're
though.
Yes, because puberty blocker includes all of this. As a term, it does. And this, again, these are just more arguments as to why I don't think these discussions are clear enough and why it just ends up adding to hysteria and sort of misinformation and greater consideration of side effects than we put into every other drug that we take on a daily basis.
If somebody was saying, you know what, dogs are generally safe to have as pets, and you were like, well, hold on here, they should be more clear because, you know, dogs are actually a type of wolf, and wolves are dangerous. So, like, actually, you need to be really specific.
Do you really think this is comparable? Please don't waste your breath.
Yes.
I think it is comparable. I think it is.
Do you eat your dog? No, it's not comparable.
What?
Well, I hope you don't.
I might.
Jesus fucking Christ. Anyway, no, it's not comparable. It's stupid.
Ooh.
I'm glad you recognize that it's stupid when somebody's pointing it out in a different term, but that's exactly what you're doing for talking about trans puberty blockers.
Ooh.
No, because they're not saying it's generally safe. I would make an argument against that being a problem too. You shouldn't say they're generally safe, and you shouldn't make out that they're necessarily more dangerous than they are. You should simply say what the fuck they are.
Do you think the comparison I was making there was about them being safe and not the overgeneralization when we're clearly talking about a subset of the category of thing? When we're talking about like
generalization
dogs.
is my issue. Yes, is it bad to be bothered by overgeneralization causing misinformation?
Ooh.
When somebody's like referring to, you know, canines are good pets, you don't suddenly say, well, you know, what about wolves?
I don't care about the dog argument. That's boring and annoying. Your analogy is bad.
Ooh.
All right. I'll spend some time trying to think of a better analogy to demonstrate what you're doing here, because when we're not talking about just puberty blockers, right? The video is about puberty blockers used for trans healthcare, and that is not a puberty blocker used for trans healthcare. It's not. It's a
used
puberty
for
blocker.
Trans healthcare. It might not be considered puberty blocking on its own.
Then okay,
but
then
if
that's the case, hold on. If you think that's the case, if you're agreeing then that it's not a puberty blocker, then that was the entire agreement.
It's included in the discussion of puberty blockers. It's on the fucking Wikipedia of puberty blockers.
Not as it relates to trans healthcare.
Yes,
you would never expect somebody talking about trans healthcare and the medicines, the puberty blockers they take for trans healthcare to be talking about this drug. There's no confusion here.
If we're talking about gender-affirming care, 100% it gets.
But we're talking about puberty.
The point is, all of this shit gets conflated. That is my point.
You're the only one conflating them. You are the only one doing that. I
am not the only one conflating them.
Oof.
Do you think the average person reads up onto any of these classes of drugs or the drugs specifically? And because if they did, they wouldn't be conflating all of the negative side effects as a possibility of one medication when that's not true.
I don't think when you're talking about treatment for a specific condition, you need to talk about the fact that there are other things that treat similar things unrelated to the
I don't even need to do that because there's different side effects within just the GnRH class itself.
So then if that's the case, then why are you trying to defend this point so hard when it's clear to pretty much every single person that's been on this call that Sabine is in no way, shape, or form conflating this drug with being a puberty blocker utilized for trans healthcare.
I just said that GnRH, even within GnRH, there are different side effects, and for me, it is annoying when we try to conflate a bunch of different drugs as all having potential same side effects. It's. I don't know if it's intentional or accidental fear mongering, but that's what the result ends up being. It's like a lot of these drugs are incredibly old. Okay, we do have quite a lot of research on them, even if they weren't specifically for trans care.
No, we do not. That is not true.
We do.
That is not true.
Some of these drugs are really, like, at least the GnRH, I think
you
it's sort
cannot,
of 30,
there is no such, there is, okay,
old.
hold on. So what you're doing right now is engaging in layman's talk that doesn't make sense. There is no such thing as a safe drug or a
I never said it was safe.
You just, hold on,
not.
let me explain.
No,
I have to build up to tell you why you're wrong, okay? There's no
I
such
said
thing.
we know what the side effects are.
We don't know what the side effects are because we haven't prescribed these for children that are trying to put off puberty to become trans. You can't look at a drug that's prescribed for one circumstance and say, well, we know it's safe in that dosage for that particular affliction, so therefore we know it's safe for all afflictions at all dosages. You don't know that. That's not true.
This isn't about whether it's safe or not, because if you get a negative side effect, it's not safe for you, obviously.
No. It's not just, it's a
unlucky.
side effect for, it's the side effects for a given disease at a given dosage. Just because you've used it for precocious puberty or something in the past doesn't mean you all of a sudden know it's also safe for people to take as puberty blockers that just want to go on to be normal trans kids or whatever. That doesn't logically follow because it might be given at a different dosage.
When
With
GnRH
the side effects that we know of, they're pretty consistent regardless. Like, if you're going to suffer from bone density loss, it doesn't matter if you're a cis kid or a trans kid. You're super.
That is the most incorrect statement
unlucky.
that you've ever made on the stream. I don't know what else to say.
What do you mean?
Just what I said. Because trans kids might be taking other drugs. Because taking these at more advanced ages.
Obviously, if you take other drugs, then the different interactions could cause different issues.
Sure, so you can't just
single drug.
But you don't get just a single drug. That's like saying you take one drug for chemotherapy. That's not true. I know you're frustrated, but yeah, obviously now you're engaged in the same medical mishaps that you're accusing other people of being engaged in.
No, I am not engaging in that. I am taking it as a drug, a singular drug, and the side effects of it. Yes, I agree. If you're taking multi-drugs, as somebody who takes fucking multi-drugs, you can get either increased potentiality of side effects or some adverse effects because some drugs just don't interact well. I'm aware of that. I'm not arguing against that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that if one singular drug with a kid, let's, I don't know, a 6-year-old that's cis and a 6-year-old that's not, the side effects are not, what is the word? I can't see any significant difference, the side effects that we already
If I
know.
prescribe you a drug for precocious puberty at 4 years old, and there's a regimen associated with that for a given age and some given therapy, I can't just say, well, that drug would probably be safe to give to a 13 or 14-year-old who wants to become trans. That doesn't logically follow.
Again, I'm not using the word safe. I'm just saying that the side effects are a potentiality for both. There's not different side effects that one can get that the other doesn't.
There might be. The side effects you have for taking a certain drug from ages 2 to 6 might be totally different than the side effects for taking a certain drug from age 12 to 16. Some drugs are safer for younger people than they are.
Worse. Usually
Sometimes, who
drugs
knows?
When you're a little kid, they're gonna do worse. For
I don't even know if that's always true. I'm sure that there are some drugs that are probably
majority of cases. Yeah.
It doesn't matter when you say majority of cases. That are already saying there might be some exceptions. But for instance, things that correlate with higher blood pressure or things that correlate with like blood sugar, whatever, might be safer for younger people than older people. Maybe a diabetic is more at risk for a certain drug that has effects on their insulin, or is more at risk for a drug that could theoretically increase their blood pressure because they already have hypertension, they already have high blood or high fat. Like there might be other things going on there, right? It probably depends. I'm just saying you can't say that because a drug is safe from 2 to 4, it must be safe from 12 to 14 for a totally different purpose.
Again, I don't like to use the word safe because people might genuinely, obviously they do, get the negative side effects, and then these drugs will not be an option for them. And it's a sad reality that there are going to be trans kids or just trans people in general that will try a bunch of these drugs and they get all the terrible adverse effects of them. And that obviously sucks, and they shouldn't be kept from this types of information and their expectations of these adverse effects. That's not really my issue. My issue is the lack of clarity and the conflation of multiple side effects into one potentiality. I find to be irresponsible at best.
Okay, Kelly, do you think that a medical doctor who is prescribing medicine for trans youth, that they would, for a puberty blocker specifically, they would recommend or prescribe spironolactone? Do you think they would do that for puberty blocking?
If GNRH was not applicable for them, then yeah, why not? Is there an issue why that wouldn't be an option for them? Not everyone's given the same med, you know, it's like everyone's fucking different.
That, you know what, that may be the case. I just, when it was asked, I guess, can we find instances where we can find a doctor prescribing spironolactone specifically to block the puberty of a trans youth?
Of
right?
why that might be better applicable in a situation is if it's a boy who's not particularly high testosterone already, doesn't have genetics that indicate that he's going to become very tall and whatever, he's probably not going to need as extreme medical intervention as someone who's already like 6 foot at the age of 14. You know, like obviously I don't.
Sure. So
feel
they
like
wouldn't need a puberty
every kid
blocker,
would
right?
need the same. Yeah, I think.
So then this wouldn't be a case of prescribing this drug as a puberty blocker, right?
I was saying the puberty blocker itself as a word was a misnomer when I started this conversation. And then I was told it wasn't even on the wiki when it was. And I am clarifying because a lot of medications that aren't just GnRH, because I would have had absolutely 100% no issue with what she was saying for the most part if she had used the word GnRH instead of puberty blocker. It's that I don't think things are clear enough. I really don't think it would hurt to just spend a bit more time to go into classes of drugs and specific drugs and the realistic outcomes of side effects and potentials were here. Like, is it really that much of a big deal for me to say I wish people were clearer about things?
If somebody is saying, if the use case for something is like 99% of the time, and I have yet to see the demonstration that
Do not give me
spironolactone
bad
has ever been
statistics when
prescribed
you
as
don't
a...
really know anything about this. It gives me
That's true, but
peace.
what I'm saying is, from everything we've looked up, from what Avia said, from the Wikipedia article, from everything else, it seems to be the case that GnRH agonists are the main puberty blocker. And by main here, I mean it seems to be pretty much the only one utilized for trans healthcare in reference to these articles in these videos. So what I'm asking you, specifically relating to puberty blockers, so what I'm asking again is, I understand and agree that spironolactone is used as a puberty blocker for a very specific type of precocious puberty where GnRH agonists are not available. So I'm asking you, when we're talking about a video relating to the types of puberty blockers taken for trans healthcare, can you demonstrate that spironolactone is utilized in this purpose as a puberty blocker relating to trans care?
I mean, was the example I gave you just before not good enough for being used for trans care? Like,
no, okay, so you're doing this thing where you keep swapping between trans care and puberty blockers.
You just said trans care. I don't...
Puberty blockers for trans care. Okay, I can be more specific. I won't even say trans care. I'm talking about trans healthcare in a general sense. Like, this is something you prescribe to help a trans individual be treated and hopefully alleviate some of the issues that are going on, namely like onset of puberty. So what I'm asking you is, when we're
Do you not think that trans care and puberty blockers get conflated as well, which is part of the issue that I was complaining about?
No, they're not conflated because puberty blockers are no. Puberty blockers are a subset of trans healthcare. They're a subset. Just like we're saying HRT or hormone replacement therapy or sex reassignment surgery or even social affirmation. Those are all aspects of trans healthcare. But they're not conflated because we're talking about subsets. And what's happening here is you keep moving from one subset, puberty blockers,
being conflated
and preventing
unless
puberty.
They specify what the fuck they're talking about in the first place. That's my
You're
issue.
the only person saying they're being conflated. Everyone else seems to
Nobody else
understand
does
exactly
any
what's being
fucking
meant.
research into any of these classes of drugs,
Okay,
so of course no one else is fucking
then
complaining.
we're simply just asking you to demonstrate that this is the case. Okay?
What the f*** do you want me to demonstrate?
Yeah. What do you want her to demonstrate?
Can you find people that do doctors that provide trans health care and prescriptions to trans people? Can you
want me to go find a doctor?
Why don't you find a doctor that supports what you're saying? Yeah, what are you even asking her to do, Matt? Is that a reasonable burden you'd place on anyone else?
Listen, this is simple. I just want a demonstration. Can you at least find one instance of a doctor saying, I prescribe spironolactone as a puberty blocker for a trans youth under my care? If you can do that, at the very least, I'm willing to entertain that.
How the f am I supposed to do that right now? Like, what are you doing? Why are you asking me for? The point is, puberty blocker, in my opinion, is a misnomer because it's not one thing, one type of medication, in my opinion. And a lot of medications get conflated under this umbrella. The medications I referenced are literally on the fucking Wikipedia for this thing that was referenced. So I think that allows enough.
Not for puberty blockers.
It doesn't matter because puberty
people.
blocker is not a word that existed just for trans people.
When we're talking about a trans video, where we're talking about puberty blockers,
it doesn't change puberty blocker as a terminology just because the trans discussion. Okay, I know everything is about trans people, but not boys.
So, I was a little confused as to it sounded almost like
Hello, Zonia.
Hello. It sounded almost like you were sort of relitigating what we were talking about a few months ago on here, but it seems like what you really want to accomplish is you are worried about the irresponsible way in which people talk about either puberty blockers in general or like without being specific about what treatment they're talking about, like treating gender dysphoria or doing gender-affirming care.
They never talk about the class of drugs, the specific drugs, and they tend to conflate all of the potential negative side effects of all drugs as being a potential of a drug that someone might take.
And so your concern is that they're they're potentially fear-mongering too much about the whole umbrella of drugs.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
So what specifically in this case bothered you about or made you think that
we
that
were
was
watching a video and she listed side effects and I gave examples of why that wouldn't necessarily be the case and that some of these meds could actually help with the thing that she was complaining had a potentiality of causing issues for. And for me, it's just annoying that people aren't clear about things. I believe in giving people good information, like proper information, instead of sort of saying, "Oh, we haven't done enough on this, on that," or it just doesn't seem very helpful, and it just seems to continue this idea that we don't know anything about any of these medications and it's all a big woo-woo mystery, and I just don't feel like that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so I haven't watched the video. I just jumped on because I heard what was being talked about. Now, from what I understand, because when it came to puberty blockers specifically for trans healthcare, the thing that I understood, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about on here a few months ago, was that, for instance, Sweden had stopped prescribing them to youth who had gender dysphoria because there wasn't enough information for them to demonstrate that the potential side effects.
Actually, quick question. Sorry to interrupt you mid-sentence, but did they disallow all types of trans-affirming care, or was it just the GnRH?
It was just the GnRH, and it was on a case by. So they said that it's not like the go-to prescription, but could still be prescribed on a case-by-case basis. So that was their general recommendation because there wasn't enough. They didn't feel that there was enough information to demonstrate that the potential side effects of it were worth it, and based on the benefits. That the benefits didn't necessarily outweigh the potential side effects. That was sort of where they're going. So they want to research this more and learn more about whether or not that is a worthwhile trade-off.
So does that mean they're still able to receive the alternative treatments, like spironolactone, for example?
That one, I don't think so, because they rolled back their gender-affirming model in general. For that, now it's a case-by-case basis as opposed to being that we will inhibit the puberty or the hormones of the child
So does that mean that they consider it a puberty blocker in that instance, if they're not allowing it?
I'm not sure what that means specifically, but since their gender-affirming model has been rolled back, so they're not inhibiting the hormones of youth who have gender dysphoria, then you can probably say yes to that, but they haven't specifically said. I mean, as far as I know, they haven't explicitly called that
Zonia,
out.
real quick question. I don't know who you are, your background, but do you think spironolactone is a puberty blocker utilized for the purpose of a puberty block? Blocking puberty.
I just want to say I never try to make an
healthcare.
argument that it's, oh my god, a puberty blocker by classification, because I think the terminology of puberty blocker is fucking stupid in the first place, is my issue.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever considered to be a puberty blocker. Has it been prescribed in some cases to inhibit testosterone in children entering puberty? Possibly. But
so if you were to watch a video, because I know we're going to talk about a hypothetical video here.
Mm-hmm.
This hypothetical video is about somebody going over the research into trans healthcare, and they break things out by topic. And at one point, they reference puberty blockers in a video about transness. Would you make the assumption that they could possibly be referring to spironolactone? Or was the better assumption there that they're pretty clearly and obviously talking about like GnRH and agonists?
I never said that they were going to be talking about spironolactone only. I meant that all of these drugs get conflated under the same fucking umbrella. And if they only meant GnRH, why not fucking say GnRH?
Anyway, so
well, I would have assumed the latter. I would have assumed the latter.
Yeah, that they're just referring to GnRH agonists,
Yeah.
right? You would not think there's a conflation here, right?
No, I would not think that. So what? Okay. So, Kelly, your concern is that they weren't specific, or
they're never specific. When we have these conversations, we're never specific about it, and that annoys me.
So, I think it's reasonable for someone when they're talking about puberty blockers to use generalized terms, unless they are themselves wanting to talk about the very specific.
Do you think it's reasonable or intelligent to conflate a lot of negative side effects as being a potentiality of one, though? I don't think, because it just, to me, it becomes fearmongery, because it's making things unclear. You're giving information, and somehow things are being more mystified than they were before you started.
Yeah.
Well.
Zonia, real quick, to clarify, imagine the same person doing this video says, now, here's puberty blockers, and here are a bunch of negative side effects relating to puberty blockers in trans healthcare, and they list them off. That's what the reference here is. Is there confusion here? Do you think there's overconflation? Do you think there's fear-mongering? If they're just saying, for puberty blockers taken for trans healthcare, here are some side effects that they may experience. Is that fear-mongering?
That doesn't sound like fear-mongering. Obviously, I'd have to hear the wording in the video itself to know.
I just want to say, I did say a couple of times, I don't necessarily believe or know that it's intentional fear-mongering, but I feel like that's the effect that it leaves you with, because it always gets brought up in the same conversation of, Sweden rolled things back, also here's all the bad side effects of all of the drugs, as if they could be in one drug. To me, that just seems oversimplified to the detriment of the discussion at hand.
Well, I think maybe next time when Sabine's making this video, she should include a specific reference saying, okay, now for everyone else, this is what I'm talking about, but for Kelly Jean specifically, I'm going to mention
Do you really think it would
GnRH
be
inhibitors.
bad for people to be specific about what the they're talking about, so that we demystify this conversation instead of making it more weird than it already is?
Yeah, listen, I'll DM Sabine.
Is it bad to give information?
I'll DM Sabine and say, you know what, Kelly Jean really confused and thinks you're conflating all this stuff. So you want to make sure you pull out Kelly Jean's name in this video, so there's no confusion.
What are you saying? Shut up.
So it's not even specifically this video is what you're saying. You're saying there's sort of a culture of this, and it's yet another contribution to this culture.
I mean, didn't you notice that this is the case? I don't really see people go in depth into the drugs, the classes, the information relating to any of this in any kind of depth at all, ever.
It probably would be nice for people to get a little bit more specific or even verbose about these things, to be explicit. But when someone is talking about puberty blockers for trans healthcare, I wouldn't be thinking that they're talking about spironolactone, because that is not a consistently prescribed thing for blocking or preventing puberty.
Okay, but the whole point is you wouldn't know. It's ambiguous. That's the problem.
Yeah, and it's not just spironolactone either. There's a bunch of other drugs that are in trans-affirming healthcare.
Yeah, because you could say, like,
It's
these
not
are my
just
puberty
GnRH.
blockers, and you would be referring to GnRH plus your spolacterone, right?
Yeah, but it's like, I just wish, like, I don't know, is this unreasonable of me to wish that people, like, spoke about things properly? Because the thing is, like, if you do have the adverse side effects of these drugs, right, it is important to know exactly what they can be and can't be. And I'm not one for limiting discussion of it. I want
She's trying to save lives here.
Conversation of it.
Okay, I have a question. Is the video, since I haven't seen yet, is it speaking to a lay audience, or is it speaking to, like, parents of trans kids? Who is it speaking to? Who's the audience?
Yeah, who is that audience?
Yeah, Kelly Jean, who's the audience?
I mean, I gave the hypothesis that I think it was talking to people that don't know much about this, right? That was and you assumed that they knew all about GnRH, whoever you are.
I never made that assumption.
No, it seems more
What?
like they're.
That is not true.
It
You
sounds
said this woman that was talking about, oh, well, we're talking about puberty blockers. Oh, everyone's going to think it's GnRH. And you made me seem like a retard for thinking that it might include other things.
Well, it seems like I'm going to take a guess, having not seen the video, but it seems to me like it's probably speaking to common parlance, in which case they're saying puberty blockers because that's what everybody's talking about, and so they're not getting specific because it would be getting into the weeds about something that a generalized audience wouldn't be as interested in.
Yeah, exactly. The average person doesn't know these things. They're not going to, like, they need to know these things to understand the discussion properly. Like, otherwise they're just gonna, that's why I think it's fear-mongery. Because if you're not giving clear information, then you can conflate it to be scarier than it is.
Well, then if they're speaking to a generalized audience, so shouldn't they be using the common parlance? Or do you think maybe that they should be clarifying the issues with the common parlance and maybe saying, okay, so when we talk about puberty blockers, this is what we usually mean.
I mean, it wouldn't hurt to just very quickly go over GnRH if that's actually what they're talking about and not considering puberty blockers as an umbrella term for other, like, trans-affirming healthcare. Right? I just want that kind of clarification. But the reason why I tend to think that doctors do, well, not doctors actually, but people that have these conversations tend to be a bit vague on it, is because they can make things sound a bit worse than they are. I don't know whether this is intentional in this case or not, but I've definitely seen people do it intentionally.
All right, well, listen. When I hear back from Sabine, I'll let you know what she says, whether she'll include
Could you
Kelly
say
Jean
Sabine
section.
one more time?
Sabine, yeah. There you go.
Okay, cool, awesome.
So,
all right, have a good one.
All right, see ya. So at one point there, you kind of got into relitigating what we had talked about before, which is like why it was that these that GnRH puberty blockers and the gender-affirming care model had been rolled back, or why it is that medical industry in other countries is wanting more information on this. Like, that's something I think. So that's what I would ask you is like, is your issue with this? I'm just going based on what you were speaking with Stephen about right before I jumped on.
I have no issue with, like, more studies, more information.
Okay, good.
That's always good. Obviously.
All right, because I was going to ask if your issue was like with the way in which the medical industry operates and how it chooses whether or not something is appropriate as a treatment for something specific, like gender dysphoria.
No, I don't have an issue with it. They can study it for another decade and then they'll find out that there's no fucking difference in the side effects that we already know of drugs that have been around for 40, 50 years. But that's just medicine in general. They like to drag their feet on shit, so...
Well, they like to make, when they're asking the question, is this an appropriate treatment for this malady?
But if we go by this,
well, they already know the drugs are safe. They already know the side effects.
Yeah, very safe.
They've tested them. These drugs are used for 40, 50 years.
I've never once used the word safe because all drugs have potentiality to not be safe.
Oh, I just meant for this because it's treated precocious puberty. We should know
all
it's
drugs
safe.
in every instance have the potentiality to not be safe. If you're allergic to them, you're gonna die, aren't you? Okay, so like I get that, and I've never once called the drugs safe.
I agree.
Well,
I said they're old, and we know what the side effects will be, and it's not going to suddenly change because people want to spend another decade doing more research. But if they want to do that, it's fine. But we'll find out that I'm right.
Yeah.
It's not so much about want; it's about the process, right? The process.
Yeah, the process is stupid. Do you not ever look at science and the medicine and think, hell, this is stupid? Also, we talk about this like we care normally about the process with medicine testing. The amount of medicines that have been properly tested on women because they were mostly tested on men. And then we find out that, oh, this isn't good for women. And oh, also, this is not good for women at this dosage. We don't find out until we're just randomly giving it to the female fucking population. Do we care about that as much as we care about trans-affirming care? No.
I don't think they test medicine on women.
I wouldn't say that because we've lowered the bar in some cases that we should lower the bar in all cases. Or
no,
other
I'm
cases.
not. I'm not
Like,
advocating for that.
Yeah, she never said that.
I
didn't say that. I said that there's not an equal amount of hysteria for the stupidity that goes on in medicine.
I think what they should be doing is they should be cautious, and so I do appreciate when there is caution around how it is that the medical industry decides to go forward with a particular treatment for a particular diagnosis. But yeah, historically there have definitely been problems. I think that things have been getting better and improving, and so there's been more caution and more desire to do explicit testing for taking one treatment for one group of people with one diagnosis over to another group of people with another diagnosis. I think that's good that they're being more cautious about that these days. But I don't know. So you think that's a problem, or?
No, I don't necessarily think
she didn't say it's a problem. The issue is they're trying to be more safe with this drug than they would with other drugs, and it's bullshit because they give other drugs with side effects, but now when it's trans people, now all of a sudden they think the side effects are like the worst thing in the world, and they've never cared about women or black people when it comes to side effects. So why are they so worried now?
I feel like they would be sloppier with their treatment, if anything.
No, because they're trying to gatekeep
the kids are involved.
Exactly. See, they're trying to save the kids.
The kids. Yes. Well, wait. Don't we want to protect our women and children both more so than anybody else, right?
Not women on birth control. They're considered unholy and evil, so they don't care about the side effects of birth control.
I see. Jeez. You've really triggered him.
What? I'm just trying to present their arguments. What do you mean?
Yeah, to be fair, I feel bad that this dragged on for so long, this conversation, but hey, it's not okay. I wouldn't have come back in and said if someone told me to go look up the Wikipedia and then it wasn't on the Wikipedia. That was
it was right there under treatments for
there.
Yeah, puberty blockers.
Okay.
It's right there. A drug used.
So it's Avi's fault or your fault. I don't know. Okay.
Like sometimes I find it frustrating, but overall I appreciate that the medical industry is going to be cautious with these prescriptions.
Yeah.
So
do you think it was okay that the United States was cautious about desegregation? If you can't put a time on another man's freedom, why should you be able to put a timetable on a trans person's access to life-saving HRT?
I would say, though, that the basis of caution in this example is my concerns would be, will they ever have enough evidence to support it being okay if we go down that road, though?
Sure doesn't seem like it.
Like, how much supporting evidence would we need?
If male birth control existed with the same side effects as female birth control, it wouldn't even be passed because men wouldn't stand for it.
Like, for example, if trans kids are at a higher risk of suicidality anyway, but then they decide to kill themselves after they started taking the treatment, was it really the treatment that made them kill themselves? And does that get included in the studies? Isn't this all quite hard to, like, actually get good information from?
They don't really use, that's not the information used in the studies. It's more about what is it that they're treating, right? So they talk about in the research I was looking into, they were talking about that gender-affirming care is used to address the symptoms of gender dysphoria, and the symptoms being the general discomfort of one's body, depression, and anxiety, right? And so then they go and they say, all right, out of all the people that we have been treating with gender dysphoria, have we seen a decrease in these symptoms that we're trying to decrease over the course of the treatment? And the answer to that is sort of mixed, and it's not a strong enough yes in those cases. And so what they're showing is, okay, well, it doesn't appear to be addressing the symptoms the way that we thought it would.
Curing, in quotations, isn't managing depression already very difficult for cis people anyway? Like, how is this going to be something that we can measure, like, easily?
Yeah, it feels like you're shilling.
I never said cure.
It's like you're shilling for big cis. Like, that's all I'm feeling right now.
Treat is better.
Yeah, I never said
That's
cure.
not what I was saying either. I'm just saying those are almost two different things, like depression and trans care.
Well, and so medical establishment are saying, well, then if it isn't decreasing these symptoms consistently enough, well, then why are we prescribing this particular treatment generally for this particular diagnosis? And so because that question isn't able to be answered, then they rolled that back as a general treatment. Now, it's still case-by-case basis in the medical industry, like in Sweden. It's just not a generally recommended treatment.
I see. I mean, there is still a lot of medication that gets prescribed daily that is barely any better than the placebo, but I don't know what the placebo would be in this type of instance. I guess you just get nothing.
Well, they'd talk it really, really, really well and then see how the kid feels. And then they'd reveal at the end of the study.
The point is, like, how do you have a control
time.
group in something like this to be able to get valid types of empirical evidence?
Well, part of the problem is that there isn't enough. There isn't enough data because there haven't been enough people. Now it's starting to change, so they're going to get more data over time, but it takes time for more people to have these symptoms and have this diagnosis.
But how would we get any information if people are constantly getting blocked?
Well, they'll do trials, right? They're not saying that you can't. They're not saying that you can't ever prescribe these things or can't have them prescribed in tests. They're saying this is not the generally recommended treatment for kids with gender dysphoria.
Yeah.
Okay, but I still don't know how that answers the issue of a control group in this instance, and I don't think you could really have one, right? And in which case, then how do we prove that it's more effective than a placebo if we can't really give it like a placebo?
It's not even about being more effective than a placebo. It's that there are other courses of treatment that they have that are lower risk and have as good or
so they're equally ineffective outcomes. In their opinion, but they're okay because
no, it has as good or better outcomes.
So this is just treating the mental health issue, I assume. So they're giving them therapy
or potential other drugs that affect their state of mood, right?
Okay,
and
therapy and antidepressants.
Or
a lot of antidepressants are barely any better than
or anti-anxiety or any number of other things, a combination of which, right?
Interesting.
As to answering your question, how are they going to get the data for that? I mean, that's something I don't know. Like, I'm not going to presume that I know better than those who are engaged in this research, right? So I can't really pretend to be an expert enough to give you a strong answer to that question.
Yeah, I mean, it's more, I'm not really demanding answers from you. It's more, I'm giving my concerns how this conversation tends to get kind of muddy because of the intricacies are never really considered.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that overall there is a pretty irresponsible way in which a lot of people handle this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you on that. I don't know about this video specifically.
It did.
But it did.
I actually don't think the majority of the video was that bad. It was just a few comments that I'd see repeated a lot were just annoying.
I'm gonna have to watch this video. Someone want to link it for me?
It's probably one of the worst I've ever seen.
I've seen way worse. It's not that bad.
Okay, I'm a little confused about this then. So what was your big criticism of it then? I must have missed that.
Mine?
Yeah.
It's just conflation of side effects from multiple drugs being potentiality of one drug, and then not naming the classes of drugs or the specific drugs, and it just being very ambiguous, and that creating
very fear-mongering.
Yes, thank you.
Well, the fear-mongering is, what is the language leading up to it? Are they saying that this is definitely what these side effects are, or is it saying these are potentially?
No, I said that this one is actually not too bad.
It's pretty bad.
So, if it's, I don't know. I just feel like there's really not much there, but it's a good conversation to have about how people generally handle this discussion or this topic, right? That's definitely something that could be talked about. Perhaps the video was a good springboard for talking about the culture of talking about puberty blocking or inhibiting of puberty in children identified with gender dysphoria.
Yeah, I mean,
All right.
That was, pretty much it.
All right.
I feel bad for derailing yet another conversation into this fucking topic, but there we go. To be fair, my gripe is more with, we could remove transgender from the parts that bother me and still have the same conversation. I feel this way towards the way that people talk about medicine and drugs in general.
And Abby completely lied and gaslit her about like the thing being on the Wikipedia, so she had to
No,
write
I
the
don't
record.
think he lied. I think that he wasn't even necessarily
He was.
wrong. No,
was.
I mean only in relation to what the Wikipedia article
Exactly.
said.
And as a doctor, he should probably know at least what the fuck Wikipedia says.
Oh, that person was a doctor?
Stop putting words in my
Purportedly a
mouth.
doctor.
Doctor of what?
He's a dermatologist.
Dermatologist. That was when the funniest f***ing own, because he's in here talking like he has any idea what he's talking about. And then Kelly brings on the hammer. She's like, "What do you even specialized in? What do you even do as a doctor?" And he's like, you could tell how like embarrassed he
This is
was.
not
He was
true,
like,
by the way.
dermatologist, and Kelly was like, "Thought so."
That's not true.
It was
by
an
the way.
epic. It was one of the most epic owns I've ever seen on my stream ever.
Well, the actual truth is I have a bunch of health issues and I just wanted free medical advice, and I was hoping it was an endocrinologist and not dermatologist.
Yeah, I mean that's what she's saying.
I
but
was not
she was
putting
just
him
saying it.
down. I was not putting him down.
She was just
being a
basically putting him in his
dermatologist,
place.
okay?
Okay.
No, I was
What did I get
not.
wrong about the Wikipedia?
It's on the Wikipedia page under puberty blockers because
what-
you guys
what
were
is-
memeing on me as how it wouldn't be on this fucking wiki. for
Wait,
whatever
what's
reason.
not on the wiki?
Oh, the
What-
drugs I was talking about that aren't GnRH.
Wait, hold on. If you go to the wiki for puberty blockers, it specifically says it's almost always referring to GnRH.
Which makes sense.
It's on the wiki page. You told me it would never be considered in this discussion, and it's fucking there.
I didn't
That's
say it would
all.
never be considered a discussion. It's just not typically classified as a puberty blocker. That's true.
Okay, but you also told me it would not be on this Wikipedia page, and it's
I never
also,
said it wouldn't be. Okay.
The wiki
I'm reading it
is
right.
specific.
I'm
Somebody,
reading it
I
right
don't know
now.
if it was
Puberty
you.
blocker.
I don't
Ready?
know if it was you or Steven that said something
Puberty
about
blockers,
wiki.
also puberty
I know
blockers, are
somebody did.
medications used to postpone puberty in children. The
We've
most
all
commonly
read
used
it.
puberty blockers are gonadotropin-releasing hormone (GnRH) agonists. Okay, so what's the contention?
Keep scrolling there, doctor. Well, doctor in air quotes. Go ahead.
That's not.
Okay.
Did
There's
not
one
do that,
instance. Now
okay?
you mentioned spironolactone. There's literally one instance of spironolactone appearing, and that is
One is
under.
not zero, okay?
Okay,
I don't
and wait, it's
justify-
not
Oh,
considered
let him
a
finish,
puberty
let him
blocker.
finish.
I
Alright,
don't need
treatment
to. 'Cause we've
possibilities-
already gone over this before.
Wait,
You know
wait,
what
I haven't
the-
heard it. I wanna
you know
hear it.
what the
Wait, let's
instance
read. Let's read it together.
I'm getting mental
Treatment
illness.
possibilities for peripheral precocious puberty in boys, such as familial male-limited precocious puberty, include anti-androgens, bicalutamide, spironolactone, and cyproterone acetate, ketoconazole, and aromatase inhibitors, testolactone, nastrols, and letshol. So yes, so I agree that those can be used adjunctively, but I would not use them as a monotherapy as a puberty blocker. That wouldn't block puberty.
No, I never said that either.
She never said it would be a
And that's
puberty
only in a
blocker.
very. And by the way, that's only in a very specific.
The point is.
The point is it's on the
Wikipedia.
wiki. You said it wasn't going to be on the
hold
wiki at
on.
all, and it's
No,
there.
No, that's very misleading. That doesn't make it classified as a puberty blocker. That's in a very specific context where it's
but I never
peripheral
said it
precocious
has to
puberty
be a
in boys
puberty
as an
blocker.
adjunctive. You said it was a puberty blocker.
Straw man.
I said when we're talking about puberty blockers, which I believe is a misnomer because there's a bunch of different drugs and classes of drugs, or whatever, in this discussion, which is the problem I have with it, because it's not clear and it's confusing when people say puberty blockers instead of referencing a specific drug.
So just so everyone knows, and again, so if anyone was confused when someone is talking to about puberty blockers, they're almost always referring to GnRH agonists.
Yeah.
Why not just say that then?
Okay.
Wouldn't that be good if they
because
did that?
because again, they're speaking in the common parlance. I said that earlier, right?
But you could just easily quickly explain what GnRH is as a puberty blocker in the conversation context. It would take like 10, 20 seconds. If that is truly the case, and they're not conflating other medications that are commonly discussed when it comes to trans-affirming care,
Sure, that would be
then
great.
it would be easy, right?
That would be great for people to do, to clarify like that at the beginning when they're talking about something, and say, when I refer to puberty blockers, I'm referring specifically to GnRH.
And that's all I want people to do.
But-
so they don't try to be sneaky and include a bunch of side effects from other drugs to be like, oh, spooky. They're all gone.
are the side effects.
It sounds to me like you do not have that criticism of this particular video. So are you just saying that? Is your argument then that this is just in general?
They did do it in this video. It wasn't. It wasn't
did.
the worst.
It was insane.
No, it wasn't.
Well, I asked you what your criticisms were. You didn't bring this one up.
I told you what the criticism was. They were conflating some of the negative side effects. It's not the worst video I've watched.
When I asked when I asked about the fear mongering. When I asked about the fear mongering by being too general, he said, "No, I don't think that this video."
Well, they weren't like hardcore fear mongering. It was just like unintentional fear mongering. That was the issue.
I don't know if it's intentional. I don't think it is in this instance, but it kind of adds to the people that are being intentionally fear mongering in other instances.
All right. Well. Okay.
Zonia, you know they're memeing on her, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay, just making sure.
Yes, I've been well aware.
Who's memeing?
You what?
That you've been sort of memeing by echoing her.
I think Kelly has won me over on this. Seems like you said that wouldn't be on the Wikipedia page, and I clearly see it there on the Wikipedia page. Now it seems like maybe we should be more clear about.
You know what?
He never agrees with me, so if it seems like then he's
you are Kelly. I bestow upon you are the new vegan debate ninja assassin debate warrior.
Look, that's not fair. Come on.
You have won.
No.
I think he's just getting upset because you schooled him, and now he's like trying to meme it away. Don't let him meme it away, Kelly. He's just trying to play it off.
Nobody thinks this, alright? I do not think this. Nobody thinks this. I'm aware. I'm getting enough death threats to know that people are annoyed, so I get it. But, I'm just saying, in these conversations, I really think it would be beneficial to everyone if we were just more clear about what the we're talking about.
So I've had some time to cool off, rethink everything.
Are you going to give me more dog analogies?
You were totally right about everything. I was just so heated.
I really like Springer Spaniels. They're cute.
The truth. So I wanted to come on and apologize to you.
Thank you.
No, you didn't. Okay.
Are you at least getting more creative death threats? Because I get the most boring ones.
Yeah, they are creative. I'll give them that.
That's good, at least. People need to try harder with their death threats.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, they get boring after a while. I've seen this one 100 times. Come on, guys. Get more creative.
Look, I'm not trying to be a doctor, and also I'm not trying to imply that Avi was wrong about anything. Alright, well, aside from whoever the brought up Wikipedia, I don't even know if it was him. I just know it wasn't.
I think it's not that he's wrong, but he's clearly outside of his area of expertise, and then he's trying to present himself as an expert when he's obviously not for this particular thing.
I wasn't putting him down for being a dermatologist either. Okay, all right. Although he doesn't prescribe trans, I guess because he's a dermatologist, but I'm sure he knows plenty.
There are definitely good reasons to call people out for overextending their credentials.
Absolutely, and I'm glad we got Avi on it today.
But, yeah, but it depends on whether or not they are actually overextending their credentials, or if they're just more conversant in understanding the language around diagnostic criteria and treatment.
I mean, he's
Yeah,
a dermatologist, so like this guy probably doesn't even think about half the scripts he's writing, right?
No, it's not true.
People are probably going to him to say, "Hey, can you give me a script for some Addies so I can have some fun tonight?"
Oh,
No, I mean, like does he even prescribe? Like this guy probably writes prescriptions for Head and Shoulders. Okay, like let's be real now. Okay.
What kind of dermatologists do you know that give out Adderall? Can I have their number? It sounds great.
Anyways, you guys take care, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Bye. Good job, Kelly. Good work today. Good harvest.
All right. No need to be sarcastic.
Anything else, or you want to trigger anybody else while you're in here, or?